You are listening to The Void Between Bones, a horror mystery set in the Expanse universe. Written by I.T. Grimsworth. Narrated by Andrew Edge. This is an unabridged recording.
Chapter 1. Aqua Beltalloda. The Kopis Edda is not a beautiful ship. I want that understood from the beginning. She is a mid-tonnage water hauler, Registry B, 4417, Tambalane, with a hull that has been patched in 17 different colors of alloy across 12 years of my ownership and 8 before that under a man named Jesper Konexny, who died alone in his cabin of a heart attack that nobody noticed for 3 days. The drive sounds like a man clearing his throat when you spool it up. The interior smells like recycled air and old coffee, and the particular kind of fear that comes from being 6 months behind on your port fees. The grav plating in the aft section has been running at 0.6 for the past 2 years, and I do not have the money to fix it. There is a leak in the number 2 water tank that Oki has patched 4 times now, and each time the patch holds for a few weeks and then starts weeping again, a slow trickle of precious moisture that we cannot afford to lose. She is mine. I have owned her for 12 years. I will probably die on her. That is not a complaint. That is a description of the terrain. My name is Yeva Dreschler-Bo, 3rd generation belter, captain of this boat. I am 48 years old, and I have been crewing on ships since I was 15, when my mother died of the lung rot that takes so many of us who spend their lives breathing filtered air in a tin can between rocks. She was 41, 5 years younger than I am now. She spent her last 3 months in a hospice on Ceres, breathing through a tube, while I sat beside her and held her hand and watched her fade. The doctors said it was the recycled air, the particulates that build up over decades in shipboard life, the cumulative effect of breathing someone else's exhalations for too long. I do not think about this often. I think about it more than I say. We were 3 days out from Tambalane Depot when the contract update came through. Tambalane is a dying station in the outer belt, a waypoint rock that most star charts do not bother naming and the ones that do list as a navigation hazard. It has a population of about 400 souls, miners, haulers, refueling techs, the kind of people who have ended up in the outer belt because the inner planets did not want them and the main belt did not have room for them. The water recycler has been breaking down for 7 years. The gravity section stopped working in 48 and was never fixed because nobody had the money for the parts. The station rotates at a rate that gives you about 0.3 Gs in the outer ring and less than half that in the core. You learn to walk with a particular gait on Tambalane, a kind of shuffling crouch that compensates for the uneven spin. It is home. It is not a good home, but it is ours. The crew was scattered through the ship when the message arrived. I was in the galley, which is where I do most of my captain work because the cabin is too small for the kind of thinking that requires pacing. The cabin has a bunk and a desk and a terminal and approximately enough floor space to stand up and turn around, provided you are not a large person. I am not a large person. Most belters are not. Calcium depletion in the bones, reduced muscle mass from low-G environments. We are built for the float, not for the well. It has its advantages. The galley has a table that seats 4 if nobody is fat, and 6 if nobody is honest about elbow room. There is a kettle that Oki keeps in working order despite the fact that it has no right to still function. The heating element has been replaced 3 times. The base is held together with thermal tape, and I am fairly certain the water reservoir is colonized by something that we have simply learned to live with. There is a viewport that shows nothing but stars and the occasional rock, which is exactly what I need to remember where I am. When the immensity of space starts to feel abstract, I look out that viewport and I remember. There is nothing between me and the void but a few millimeters of hull alloy and the grace of a ship that has been held together by stubbornness and prayer. The message came through as a text burst. No video, no preamble, just a contract cancellation and a new assignment, pushed through 3 relay hops and encrypted with codes I recognized as OPA middle management, the kind used by people who want you to know they have connections but do not want to tell you what those connections are. The encryption was military grade, or close to it. That should have told me something. It did tell me something. I ignored it. Survey contract, KV, 1191. Carbonaceous chondrite, for 0.2 kilometer diameter. Standard geological survey plus subsurface mapping. Payment, 18,000 Martian dollars, half up front. I read it 3 times. 18,000. For a survey job. A standard survey job on a rock nobody had ever bothered to name. The half up front alone was more than we made in 3 months of ice hauling. More than we made in 4 months, if I was being honest. More than we had seen in a single payment since the job for the OPA courier run 2 years ago. The one that had taken us through the debris field off Pallas and had nearly cost us the forward maneuvering thrusters. Havel came in while I was staring at the screen. Old Havel. Havel Marksuksane, 61 years old, mechanic, storyteller, the pampaw of this crew in every way that mattered. He is the kind of man who enters a room and fills it without meaning to, not because he is loud, but because he is solid in a way that most things in the belt are not. He was carrying a cup of something that might have been coffee and might have been hot water with old grounds recycled through it. You can never tell with Havel's beverages, and he refuses to clarify. The cup itself was a relic, a ceramic mug with a chip in the rim and the faded logo of a mining company that went bankrupt 30 years ago. He had carried it through 3 ships and 2 decades. Boss Mang looking at something, he said. Not a question. Contract update, I said. Ice job is cancelled. They want us to survey a rock instead. Rocks we can do. He sat down heavily, the way old belters sit, with a kind of careful placement that acknowledges the low gravity without surrendering to it. The chair groaned under him. Everything on this ship groans. It is the ship's language. What rock? KV 1191. He frowned. The lines around his eyes deepened. Do not know it. Nobody does. That is the point. The pay. I told him. He raised his eyebrows, the highest display of surprise I have ever seen from him in 12 years of working together. That is a lot of money for a dirt sample, Boss Mang. I know. So what is wrong with it? I looked at him. He looked at me. This is the thing about a crew that has been together for years. You do not need to explain your silences. He knew I was worried. I knew he was worried about me being worried. We sat in that understanding for a moment, and then Oki came in. Oksana Vasquez-Nairn, 31, engineer, born on Tycho Station, which is a credential that carries serious weight in the belt. Tycho produces good engineers the way some places produce good dust, and for similar reasons. The training is brutal and thorough, and it leaves you with the ability to diagnose a drive imbalance by the sound it makes at 3 different RPMs. Oki can do that. I have seen her do it. She is a small woman with large hands, and the kind of nervous energy that makes her look like she is about to vibrate out of her skin at any moment. She is always touching things. The bulkhead, the table, the kettle. She reads the world through her fingertips. I have no better explanation. I have watched her diagnose a drive misalignment by putting her palm flat on the deck and closing her eyes, feeling the vibration pattern through her bones. She was right. The port alignment bushing had worn down by 3 micrometers. She replaced it. The drive ran smooth again. What is the word, Boss Mang? I told her. She listened, then walked to the kettle and put her hand on it. Not to check the temperature, just to touch it, to ground herself in the physical reality of the ship. 18,000, she said. That is too much. Yes. And we are taking it. Yes. She nodded. That was all. That is the thing about being captain. Sometimes your crew knows you are making a mistake, and they follow you into it anyway. Not because they trust your judgment, because they trust you. There is a difference. I try to deserve it. Kitano found us in the middle of this. Kitano Breves, 27, navigator, pilot, the youngest member of the crew by a decade, and the most devout by several light years. He follows the Mons cult, which is a belt-specific spiritual tradition that I do not fully understand despite his patient explanations. The core idea is that rocks are not dead matter but sleeping consciousness, that every asteroid carries within it a kind of awareness, slow and vast, and utterly indifferent to human time. The void between rocks, in the Mons cosmology, is not empty. It is a medium, a connective tissue, a kind of dark ocean in which the rocks float like islands, and the consciousness that moves between them is something the Mons call Deading Coping, the nothing friend. Kitano has tried to explain this to me 4 times. I retain about 60%, and I think that is generous. He was holding a small stone in his hand when he entered the galley. He is always holding a small stone. He has a collection of them in a mesh bag by his bunk, each one from a different asteroid, each one named. He talks to them. I have decided not to find this strange because it is not my place to judge how other people find meaning in the void. A new rock, he said, and there was something in his voice, not excitement, exactly, but attention. The kind of focus a man gives to something he is about to name. KV 1191. That is out past the main belt, near the Hilda group. You know it? I asked. No. He turned the stone over in his fingers. But I know the name. It means something. I do not know what. Havel laughed. Your rock's talking to you again, boy. Kitano did not laugh back. They always talk, Pampaw. You just do not listen. That was the first moment. I remember it now because it was the last time I thought Kitano was being dramatic about nothing. Pita joined us last. Pita Ngozi, medic, cargo supervisor, 42 years old, the quietest member of the crew by choice, and the most observant by nature. Pita uses him pronouns. It took me about 6 months to adjust, and now it feels more natural than any other way of referring to him. Him is the kind of person who can sit in a room for 2 hours without speaking and somehow still be fully present, absorbing everything, missing nothing. Him entered the galley, listened to the summary, and then said, with perfect stillness, "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow," I said. "The advance payment is already in our account." Pita nodded. IM's face gave nothing away. I have since learned that this is because Pita is very good at hiding things. At the time, I thought him was just being IM. The rest of the day passed in preparation. We took on supplies from the station, food packs, reaction masks, spare filters for the recycler. Oki ran a diagnostic on the drive and pronounced it acceptable. Kitano plotted the course to KV 1191, a burn of 4 days through empty space. Havel told a long and rambling story about a prospector he had known on Vesta who had found a vein of platinum group metals and spent the money on a woman who turned out to be a UN intelligence officer. The story was probably not true. It was still entertaining. That night, I sat in my cabin with the terminal off and the lights dimmed, and I wrote the first log entry that would become part of this record. I did not know then that I was writing for anyone other than myself. I thought I was just doing what I always do, putting the day to rest on the page so I could sleep. Kopis Edda, ship's log, Yeva Dreschler-Bo commanding. 3 days out from Tamburlaine, heading for a rock that nobody has surveyed and nobody has named, and somebody is paying us far too much to look at. The crew is good. The ship is tired. The money is in the account. Me not pense it was wrong. Not yet. But coping, when the alk was too sweet, you check for contamination. Sasaku? I slept badly. I did not know why. The ship hummed around me. The vents whispered. Somewhere in the darkness of the outer belt, a rock was waiting for us. Now I know what it was waiting for. But by then, it was too late. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Rock That Doesn't Speak. KV 1191 appeared on our scopes 3 days after we left Tamburlaine, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the silence of space. I have been in that silence for 33 years, and it is the closest thing I have to a constant. It is the silence of a room that you have lived in so long you no longer hear the clock ticking. The silence, I mean, was the absence of debris. A rock this size, carbonaceous chondrite, 4.2 kilometers across, should have a halo around it. Every asteroid in the belt does. They shed material over geological time, impacts, thermal cycling, the slow stress of tidal interactions tugging at the body's irregular shape. It is one of the first things a prospector looks at. The debris field tells you how old the surface is, how stable the body is, how much risk you run putting a ship into close orbit. KV 1191 had nothing. The scopes showed clean space all the way to the dark surface. No dust, no fragments. No halo of small gravel catching the light. It was as if something had swept the area, as if the rock had swallowed everything that had ever come near it and left no trace at all. I stood on the bridge behind Kitano's seat and watched the image resolve on the main display. The rock was a dark shape against the stars, irregular, pitted with craters that had no soft edges. They looked fresh, but fresh craters produce ejecta, and there was no ejecta. I tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe the rock was younger than the survey data suggested. Maybe it had been captured recently, pulled into this orbit from deeper space, and had not had time to accumulate a fragment field. Maybe the OPA contact had sent us to a rock that had already been surveyed and cleaned by a previous team. Any of those could explain it. I collected the explanations like a woman collecting stones on a beach, knowing she will only carry a few before her pockets get heavy. "Bossman," Kitano said. His voice was quiet. "Do you see it?" "The clean field," I said. "I see it." "No." He shook his head. "Not just the field. Look at the surface." I leaned in closer. The surface was unremarkable, dark charcoal, standard spectrographic profile for a C-type body. But Kitano was drawing my attention to something else, the pattern of the craters. They were too evenly distributed, too regular, like the rock had been placed in a specific orientation and had not moved since whatever event had scarred its face. I told myself it was pareidolia. The human brains need to see patterns where none exist. I told myself a lot of things on that approach. I was building a collection of explanations that would not survive the next 72 hours. "Set a parking orbit," I said. 1.5 clicks. I want a full surface scan before anyone goes EVA. Kitano nodded, but he did not move immediately. He was staring at the rock with an expression I had not seen on his face before. Not fear, exactly. Recognition. The way a man looks at a face he has seen in a dream and cannot place when he wakes. "Kitano," I said. He blinked. "Yes. 1.5 clicks. I am sorry, Bossman." He turned back to his console and began the approach calculations. I watched him for a moment longer than I needed to, then went below to find the others. The Kopis Edda settled into orbit around KV 1191 at 1430 shipboard time. The burn was smooth. Oki had tuned the drive to a precision that a ship of this class had no right to deliver. When the engines cut and we were in free fall, the ship went quiet in a way that made me aware of my own heartbeat. I could feel it in my ears, in my fingertips, in the space behind my eyes. A pulse. My pulse. Inside a ship that was holding position above a rock that had no pulse at all, or so I thought then. We gathered in the galley. The table was covered with preliminary scan data, spread across a tablet that Havel had propped against the kettle. The surface composition was ordinary. The density was consistent with a C-type body. No metal anomalies, no unusual thermal signatures, nothing that would explain the clean debris field or the 18,000 Martian dollar contract that was now sitting in our account, already spent in my head on repairs and port fees and the debts that had been accumulating since before I took command of this ship. "Pelka," Kitano said. We looked at him. "That is what I am naming it." He held up his hands, anticipating the mockery that did not come. The Mons tradition requires naming. Every rock a belter works, you name it. It is respect. "Pelka," Havel said, testing the word. "Cold one." "Yes." Kitano nodded. "The surface temperature is lower than it should be for this distance from the primary. About 12 degrees colder than the models predict. I have checked the instruments 3 times. It is not an equipment error." Nobody said anything. Havel looked at me. I looked at the tablet. The rock was cold. The rock had no debris field. The rock was sitting in an orbit that did not quite match any of the standard models for this region of the belt. And Kitano was naming it like a pet, like a thing that could hear him. "Log the temperature anomaly," I said. "We begin surface survey at 7 o'clock tomorrow. Havel and Oki on the first EVA. Kitano, I want continuous seismic monitoring from the bridge. Every hour, a report." "And if the seismic data shows something unusual?" Kitano asked. I had no answer for that. "Then we will deal with it when it does." The first EVA was routine. Havel and Oki suited up and went out onto the surface to collect samples, core scrapings, regolith from 4 different sites, surface composition analysis from the areas that the orbital scan had flagged as slightly anomalous. The suits worked perfectly. The tools worked perfectly. The rock was exactly what it appeared to be, a carbonaceous chondrite, unremarkable in every measurable way. I watched them through the suit cams, listened to their breathing over the comm channel, and told myself that the clean debris field was just geology and the cold surface was just a quirk of the rock's history, and the pulse that Kitano had not yet shown me was nothing at all. But when he showed me the seismic data that evening, I understood why he had been quiet all day. "There is a pulse," he said. He had it displayed on the bridge console, a waveform that looked, at first glance, like the standard microseismic activity you would expect from any asteroid. Thermal cycling, tidal stress, the low background noise of a body moving through space. But when he zoomed in, the trace resolved into something else, something regular. A rhythm. It was slow. About once every 47 seconds, the rock produced a compression wave that traveled through the body with a regularity that Kitano had already confirmed did not match any known geological process. No tidal stress pattern, no thermal cycling frequency, no resonance from the Kopis Edda's drive. The wave originated from deep inside the rock, not from the surface, not from the crust, but from somewhere near the center. 47 seconds, I said. That is the interval? Approximately. I have been tracking it for 6 hours. The variation between pulses is less than 0.3 of a second. That is not natural, Bossmang. I stared at the waveform. A spike. A pause. Another spike. Like a heart that had never stopped beating. That had been beating since before any human had left Earth. That would be beating long after every human was dust, and the sun had gone cold. Log it, I said. That is all you want me to do? Log it. That is all we can do right now. We do not know what it is. We do not know what causes it. We log it. We continue the survey, and when we file our report, we include the data. Sasako. He nodded, but I saw the look on his face. He was not satisfied. He would not be satisfied until he understood what the pulse was, where it came from, what it meant. Kitano's faith made him the kind of person who looked for meaning in everything, and I was not sure that was a useful trait when the rock itself seemed to be offering one. I spent the rest of that evening on the bridge, reviewing the scan data myself. The surface survey results were clean, too clean. The regolith composition matched the standard profile for C-type asteroids, but the distribution of elements was more uniform than natural processes would typically produce. I pulled up comparative data from 3 other asteroids of similar size and composition that we had surveyed in the past. The differences were subtle, but they were there. KV 1191 had been sorted, graded, processed. The surface had the look of a body that had been handled, even if the handling had happened so long ago that the evidence was only visible to someone looking very closely. I closed the files and sat in the dark of the bridge, the only light coming from the console displays and the distant stars visible through the forward viewport. The rock hung against the blackness, featureless and patient. I watched it for a long time. It did not do anything. It just existed, the way all rocks exist, silently, eternally, indifferent to the small creatures that had come to study it. But the pulse was still there. I could feel it through the deck, through the soles of my boots. 47 seconds between waves. A rhythm that should not exist. That night, we ate together in the galley. Peta had made stew from the emergency rations, not good, but hot, which was the important thing. We sat around the table and ate and talked about nothing in particular. The surface survey, the supplies, the state of the water recycler, ordinary things, the kind of conversation that fills the space between more important things. And Havel told a story. He told it the way he always told stories, leaning back in his chair, cup in hand, the words coming slow and easy, the way water finds its own level. It was about a prospector he had known on Pallas, a man who had claimed to hear voices in the rock. The man had spent 3 months alone in a survey pod, and when he came back, He had 1,000 pages of notes about a civilization that lived inside asteroids and communicated through vibration. The notes were still taught at the Belt Polytechnic as a case study in isolation psychosis. The man himself had been committed to a facility on Ceres and had died there, still insisting that the rocks were alive, that they were trying to tell us something, that we were just not listening hard enough. Do you believe it? Oki asked. Believe what? Havel said. That there is a civilization inside rocks. No, but I believe a man alone in the dark for 3 months will hear whatever he needs to hear to stay sane. And maybe that includes voices. Maybe the dark gives you what you need. That is dark, Pampaw, Peta said, and there was a smile in IM's voice. It is the belt, Havel said. Everything is dark out here. He raised his cup. But there is an older story. The Deading Coping. The Nothing Friend. You know it. Nobody did. He told it anyway. The Deading Coping, he said, was a figure in old Belter folklore, a presence that lived inside empty rocks, a kind of spirit that called out to prospectors who spent too much time alone. It did not want to hurt you. It wanted company. It would call your name in the vibration of the hull, in the hum of the life support, in the sound of your own breathing when the ship was dark and quiet, and you were the only person awake. If you answered it, it would follow you. Not malevolently, just present, like a stray dog that had decided you were its person. The old-timers used to say, Havel finished, that if you heard the Deading Coping calling, you had to answer in a language it could not understand. That was the trick. You had to say something in a language it did not know, and then it would get confused and leave you alone. Otherwise, it would follow you forever. Did anyone ever try? Kitano asked. His voice was serious. He was not treating this as a joke. Havel thought about it. There is a story about a prospector on Themis who heard the calling and answered in every language he knew. Belter, English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, even some old Earth language his grandmother had taught him, some dialect from the Caucasus Mountains that nobody else in the belt could speak. He went through them all. The Nothing Friend did not go away. It stayed with him for the rest of his life. He said it was not bad company, once you got used to it. He said it was like having a conversation with yourself, but the other half of the conversation was happening in a room you could not see. And what language does a Nothing Friend not understand? Oki asked. Havel grinned. Nobody knows. That is the joke. The old-timers telling the story never said what language. So you are stuck. You hear the voice in the dark, and you know you have to answer, but you do not know what to say. And by the time you figure it out, it is already too late. Here we go. Nobody laughed. The story sat in the air between us, heavier than it had any right to be. Kitano stared at his plate, turning his small stone over and over in his fingers. Peta got up to clear the dishes. Oki put her hand flat on the table, feeling for something only she could sense. The ship was quiet around us, the ordinary sounds of the Kopis Edda muted and distant, as if the galley had become a separate space, sealed off from the rest of the vessel by the weight of Havel's words. I went to my cabin and tried to sleep. I lay in the dark and listened to the ship. The vents whispered. The hull creaked. Somewhere in the rock below us, a pulse was beating every 47 seconds. I told myself it was geology. I told myself the clean debris field had a natural explanation. I told myself Havel's story was just a story and Kitano's religion was a comfort mechanism, and the 18,000 Martian dollars would pay for a new water recycler and maybe even the grav plating repair. I told myself all of this, and I almost believed it. But that night, when I was half asleep and the ship was dark and the only sound was the hum of the recycler fans, I heard something. Not a voice, not a vibration, just a shift in the quality of the silence, a change in pressure, a sense that the air in my cabin was not the same air that had been there a moment ago. I lay still and listened. 47 seconds passed, then another 47, then another. Nothing, just the dark, just the ship, just the rock, beating its slow pulse through the vacuum. I did not sleep well that night. I have not slept well since, but I did not know that yet. I was still collecting my explanations, my reassurances, my small comforts. I did not know that the Deading Coping does not need you to answer in any language at all. It just needs you to listen. Chapter 3. What the Drill Found. Survey Day 3 began like the others. Breakfast in the galley, a status check from each department, the familiar routine of a crew that has worked together long enough to anticipate each other's needs without speaking. Oki reported that the surface samples were unremarkable. Pavel said the drill was calibrated and ready for the deep core. Kitano said the pulse had not changed. He said it the way a man says the weather has not changed. Neutral, professional, the voice of someone who has stopped expecting anyone else to share his concern. I shared it. I just did not know what to do with it. The deep core drill was our last major survey task. We had taken surface samples from 4 sites, run spectrographic analysis on the regolith, mapped the body's density distribution through passive seismic imaging. The contract required a subsurface core sample to a depth of at least 60 meters. Standard procedure. We had done this 100 times on 100 different rocks. The drill rig was mounted on the Kopis Edda's external equipment pallet, a rotary corer designed for carbonaceous chondrite, capable of reaching 100 meters in ideal conditions. Pavel had set it up the previous evening, running the calibration checks with the methodical patience of 40 years of working with machines. He was good at his job. He was good at everything that required his hands. I watched the feed from the bridge as the drill engaged. The display showed the bit penetrating the surface, the torque readings, the temperature at the drill head. Normal. Everything normal. The auger chewed through carbonaceous chondrite at the expected rate, the tailings coming up clean and unremarkable. I watched the depth counter tick upward and felt the familiar rhythm of a routine operation, the kind of work that paid the bills and kept the ship flying and did not require me to make any decisions harder than which filter to replace first. At 47 meters, the torque dropped. Hold. Pavel's voice came over the comm. I am reading a void. The bit just punched through into empty space. Confirm, I said. Repeat the reading. He did. The void was at approximately 80 meters depth, well below our target, which meant the drill had penetrated deeper than the loose overburden suggested it would. The core sample was intact through the first 47 meters, but beyond that, there was nothing. The bit was spinning in open space. A cave, Oki said from behind me. She had come onto the bridge while I was watching the feed. Maybe, or a fracture, or a gas pocket that vented at some point in the past. Torque readings do not support a gas pocket. She leaned over the console, her hand finding the edge of the display, needing to touch it. The transition was too sharp. Gas pockets show gradual changes in density. This was a wall, a boundary, solid rock to open void in less than a centimeter. It is like the drill hit a room. We looked at each other. The bridge was quiet except for the hum of the systems. I want to go down there, Oki said. I want to see what is in that void. Wait until Havel clears the bore, I said. Then we send a probe first. The probe went in at 9:30. It was a standard survey drone, small, camera-equipped, with a basic LiDAR array and maneuvering thrusters. Oki piloted it from the bridge while we watched the feed on the main display. The borehole opened into a space that the LiDAR mapped as cylindrical, approximately 3 meters in diameter, with walls that were smooth in a way that natural formations are not. The camera showed surfaces with the texture of polished stone, not polished by abrasion, but grown, shaped, cured into a finish that looked both organic and deliberate. The probe floated into the void, and its lamp illuminated walls that reflected the light in a way that suggested they had never seen it before, that they had been waiting in total darkness for billions of years. It is a tunnel, Oki said. Her voice was quiet. It goes deeper than I can see. The LiDAR is not getting a return from the far end. Keep going. The probe moved forward. The walls stayed consistent. The same smooth, organic surface. The same cylindrical cross-section that was not quite regular, not quite circular, but something in between. A throat, I thought. Oki had said it first, and I could not unhear it. The tunnel had the shape of something designed to move material, to pass things through, to swallow. At 200 meters, the LiDAR finally returned a boundary. A chamber. The tunnel opened into a void mapped as roughly spherical, about 12 meters in diameter. The camera showed a space that was dark in a way that felt different from ordinary darkness. The darkness of a place that had never been opened, that had never admitted light, that had been sealed since before the solar system formed. The darkness of a place that had not expected to be seen. "There is something in the center," Oki said. The camera found it. An object, resting on a raised platform of the same smooth material as the walls. It was not large, maybe 40 centimeters long, cylindrical, with a surface that the camera could not quite hold in focus. The lamp illuminated it, but the image kept shifting, as if the light was being absorbed and reflected at uneven rates, as if the object was not quite in the same physical space as everything around it. "What is it?" I said. Peeta had come onto the bridge. We were all watching now. Havel had come up from the drill station and was standing in the doorway. Peeta leaned forward, eyes fixed on the display. "I do not know," Peeta said slowly, "but I want to run every scanner we have on it before anyone goes near it." "Agreed," I said. "Oki, get the science package ready. You and Peeta go down first. Havel and I follow after the bore is secured." "Bossman," Havel said, "I should be on the first team. I know the drill rig." "You will be on the second team. That is not negotiable." He started to argue. I gave him a look that had ended every argument for 12 years. He subsided. Oki and Peeta went down at 10:15. I watched them on the monitors from the bridge. The feed was steady, helmet cams showing the narrow shaft dropping into darkness, the pale circle of the borehole mouth growing smaller above them as they descended. The audio channel carried their breathing, the rustle of suit fabric, the small sounds of human beings moving through a space that had never contained them before. They reached the bottom of the borehole at 10:22. I watched them step into the tunnel one at a time, their helmet lights swinging across walls that caught the beams and threw them back in strange, muted angles. The tunnel was not reflective, but it was not entirely absorbent either. It drank light, but it drank it unevenly, leaving pockets of brightness that seemed to hover in the air longer than they should have. "Give me a moment," Oki said. She had stopped at the threshold where the bore opened into the tunnel. On the monitor, I watched her put her palm flat against the wall. She held it there, not moving, her breathing steady and slow. "What does it feel like?" I asked over the comm. A pause. Oki's voice came back, and there was something in it I had never heard before, uncertainty. "It is not cold. It should be cold. There is no thermal mass in a vacuum-exposed tunnel at this distance from the sun. But it is not cold. It is neutral, like it is the same temperature as my skin, like it is matching me." "Get the readings," I said. "Do not touch anything you do not need to touch." They reached the chamber. The camera on Oki's suit showed the space opening around her, the walls curving into the spherical void, the platform in the center, the object resting on it. The object looked different from every angle, its shape seeming to change depending on where you stood. Not intentionally, just as if it did not have a fixed geometry, not in any way that human eyes could track. Peeta ran the first set of scans. I watched the data stream come up on the bridge display. "These do not make sense," Peeta said after a long silence. "The density readings are inconsistent. Every time I scan it, I get a different value. The composition analysis changes between passes, carbonaceous, silicate, metallic, and then something that does not match any entry in the database." "Equipment error?" "I ran calibration this morning. The equipment is fine. The object is not." Oki moved closer. I saw her reach out a hand, and I opened my mouth to tell her not to touch it. Then I closed it because she was not touching it. She was holding her hand a few centimeters from the surface, feeling for something her instruments could not measure. "It is vibrating," she said. "Very low frequency. I can feel it through my gloves." "Same frequency as the pulse." "Close. Not the same. Related. I think the pulse is coming from this object. The whole rock is conducting it, like the asteroid is a speaker, and this is the source of the sound." Nobody spoke. The silence on the bridge was total. Then Havel's voice came over the comm. "Boss Mang, I am coming down." "Havel, I am already in the bore. I will be there in 5 minutes." I did not argue, partly because he was already past the point where arguing would help, partly because I wanted to see the object myself, partly because I was beginning to feel the vibration too, not through my skin, but through the ship, through the deck plates, through the bones of the Kopis Edda. A low hum that I had not noticed until Oki mentioned it, and now that I had noticed it, I could not unnotice it. Havel reached the chamber. I watched him on the monitor as he stepped onto the platform, his suit lights illuminating the object from a new angle, making it look different again. He stood there for a moment, looking at it. "It is beautiful," he said. "Pampaw," Kitano said from his station. His voice was sharp. "Do not touch it." "Me not going to touch it," Havel said. "Just looking. Just." He reached out. I saw it happen on the monitor in the same moment that I heard Oki say his name, Peta say his name, my own voice saying Havel, no into the comm, but he had already crossed the distance, his hand already extended, the tips of his fingers already making contact with the surface of the object. The feed flickered. The lights in the chamber dimmed and returned. The object, I cannot describe what it did. It did not move. It did not change color. But there was a shift in the room, a sense of something having happened, a door having been opened, or a signal having been sent. The vibration in the deck plates changed pitch. The pulse in the rock. I felt it. We all felt it. Skipped one beat, and then resumed, faster than before. Havel stood very still. His hand was still on the object. His face, visible through his helmet, was calm. Not afraid. Not surprised. Just calm. The calm of a man who had been expecting something and had found it. "Havel," I said, "are you all right?" He took his hand away. The motion was slow, deliberate, as if the air around his fingers had become thicker. He looked at his palm, flexed his fingers, then looked up at the camera. "All good, Boss Man," he said. "It is not hot, not cold. It is just there." I watched his face on the monitor. There was something in his eyes that I could not name. Not wonder, not fear. A third thing, a thing I had no word for, that sat somewhere between recognition and belonging. "Come back up," I said. "Now, all of you. We are done for the day." Oki and Peta moved toward Havel. He was still looking at his hand. I watched him flex his fingers again, and I saw his lips move. He was saying something, but the comm did not pick it up. Something in Belter Creole, something I could not quite hear. After they came back up and the suits were stowed, Oki pulled me aside in the corridor. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking slightly despite her effort to steady them. "Yeva," she said quietly. When he touched it, I was standing right next to him. I felt the vibration change before my instruments registered it. It was like the object recognized him, like it had been waiting for someone to make contact, and now that someone had, it was awake. I know how that sounds. "Then what are you telling me?" "I am telling you that we need to be careful. Whatever that thing is, it is not passive. It responded to him, and I do not think it is done responding." They came back up through the bore, one at a time. The journey took 15 minutes. By the time they reached the surface, Havel was himself again, telling a joke about the drill, complaining about the fit of his suit, asking if anyone had saved him dinner. Normal. Entirely normal. I searched his face for any sign of what had happened in the chamber and found nothing. But that night, I found Oki in the engine room with her hand pressed flat against the deck plating, eyes closed, listening. The vibration in the ship had changed. The hum was lower now, more present, like a second voice running beneath the ordinary sounds of the life support and the power systems. "The vibration changed," she said, when I asked. "When he touched it, the entire rock changed. It is like it knew, and I think it is still changing. The frequency is still drifting. It has not settled into a new pattern yet. It is waiting for something." "Knew what?" She opened her eyes and looked at me. She did not have an answer, but she did not need one, because the answer was in the deck plates and the walls and the air itself. I thought about Havel's face in the chamber, the calm, the recognition, the sense that he had found something he had been looking for his whole life without knowing it. I thought about the way his hand had stayed on the object for those extra seconds, the way he had flexed his fingers afterward like he was testing a new sense. "He is different now," I said. It was not a question. "Yes," Oki said, "but I do not know how, and I do not know if it will get worse." The rock knew there was someone inside it now, and it had been waiting. I did not sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Havel's hand on the object, the feed flickering, the pulse skipping, and below all of that, beneath the images and the data and the questions, I felt the vibration, low and constant, the voice of the rock, speaking in a language I could not understand, telling me something I was not ready to hear. Chapter 4. The Arrow's Silence. The day after we found the tunnel, I filed our preliminary report. I sent it through the OPA relay on the encrypted channel the contact had specified. I included the geological data, the composition analysis, the seismic readings. I did not include the object. I did not include the tunnel. I said we had found an anomalous subsurface void and that we were investigating further. Then I waited. The first 24 hours passed with no response. The Kopis Edda held position above KV 1191, and the crew performed the routine tasks that running a ship requires. Oki ran the engine diagnostic, checking every line and valve with the focused attention she brought to all her work. Peta inventoried the medical supplies. Kitano plotted and replotted the same course corrections, adjusting for orbital drift. Havel was quiet. I noticed it because Havel was never quiet. He was the kind of man who told stories to no one in particular, who hummed while he worked, who found reasons to come to the galley 3 times an hour because he wanted to be around people. But after the tunnel, he was quieter. He still worked. He still came to meals. He just did not fill the space the way he used to. The silence around him had a different texture now, not the comfortable silence of an old friend, but something held, something withheld. I told myself he was processing what he had seen. I told myself he was tired. I told myself a dozen things, and none of them quite fit, but I did not push because there was no obvious reason to push. On the second day, I started checking the news feeds. It was a habit I had developed early in my captaincy, checking the broad system news for anything that might affect a contract, any shift in the political landscape that might make a particular run dangerous. The belt was never stable, but the degree of instability varied. When the OPA was fighting with itself, the shipping lanes got harder. When the inner planets were posturing, the customs checkpoints got tighter. You learned to read the weather through the static. The static on day 2 was about Eros. Eros Station was one of the major population centers in the belt, a hollowed-out rock with a population of over 1 million, a trading hub, a place that had been inhabited long enough to develop its own culture and politics and particular texture of life. I had never been there. I had known people who had. It was the kind of place that existed in the background of every belter's awareness, a constant, a landmark in the mental map of the system. The news feeds were full of noise about it. Nothing official, nothing concrete, just rumors. A quarantine had been declared. Ship traffic was being diverted. The UN had a presence in the area that no one was explaining. The MCR had sent a team that had not been heard from. The reports used the careful, measured language of controlled panic, the words of people who did not want to say what they knew because saying it would make it real. I sat in my cabin and read through the feeds for 2 hours, looking for something solid. There was nothing, just noise. The kind of noise that accumulates around something the inner planets do not want to explain. Oki found me there in the evening. She came in without knocking, which she never did unless it was urgent. Her face was pale. "I have the scanner results from the object," she said. And she sat on the edge of my bunk. The bunk groaned under her weight. That familiar sound, the ship complaining, the ordinary music of a vessel still functioning normally despite everything. "They do not stabilize," she said. "Every reading is different. I have run the object through every scanner we have: mass spectrometer, composition analyzer, density mapper, thermal camera. Every single instrument gives a different result on every pass. The object changes its properties when you look at it, not randomly. It changes to something that matches the range of the instrument you are using, but it will not hold still long enough for any single reading to be reliable. That is not possible. I know, but it is happening. I looked at her. She was holding something back. I could tell from the way she was not meeting my eyes. What else? I said. She took a breath. It is Havel. What about him? His biometrics. I pulled the data from his suit log after he touched the object. His temperature is running low, about 1.5 degrees below his normal baseline. His heart rate is lower than it should be during rest. His neural activity shows patterns I cannot match to any known sleep-wake state. He said he felt fine. He said that, but his body says something else. I sat back in my chair. The cabin felt smaller than usual. The walls felt closer. The vents whispered. Keep monitoring him, I said. Do not tell him. Do not tell anyone else yet. I want to know if anything changes. Yeva. She used my name, not my title. Something is wrong with that rock. Something is wrong with that object. And something is wrong with Havel now. I need you to hear me. I hear you. Then what are we going to do? I did not have an answer. I had an encrypted channel to a contact who was not responding, a crew member who was changing in ways I could not measure, a rock that was pulsing like a heart, and an object that changed its properties when you looked at it. I had an $18,000 contract and a ship that was falling apart and a growing certainty that we had stepped into something far larger than a routine survey. Wait, I said. We wait for the contact to respond. We continue the survey, and we watch. Oki looked at me for a long moment. Then she stood and left the cabin without another word. The news feeds got worse on the third day. More rumors about Eros. A quarantine zone extending to 500 kilometers. All civilian traffic rerouted. A statement from the UN that used the phrase ongoing situation assessment 3 times without providing any assessment at all. The MCR had issued a parallel statement that said essentially nothing but used more words to do it. The OPA channels were quieter than I had ever heard them. Not silent, but cautious, as if everyone was waiting to see which way the wind would blow before committing to an opinion. I read through the feeds while I ate my breakfast alone. The galley was empty. Oki was in engineering. Katano on the bridge. Peta in the med bay. Havel was somewhere. I did not know where. That was becoming a pattern. The silence from the inner planets had a particular texture. I had heard it before, during crises. It was the sound of people deciding what story to tell. The facts were not in dispute. Something had happened on Eros, something dage modak. But the official version had not been written yet, and until it was, everyone was going to pretend they did not know anything. I scrolled through the OPA whispernets, looking for anything that connected Eros to what we had found in KV 1191. There was nothing. No mention of anomalous pulses in distant asteroids. No mention of tunnels that should not exist. No mention of objects that changed their properties when you looked at them. The Eros story was big enough to swallow everything else, and our little rock in the outer belt was invisible against its shadow. But the pulse was still there. I could feel it through the deck, through the soles of my boots, through the bones of the ship. 41 seconds now, faster than before, faster than it had been when we arrived. And Havel was quiet, and the contact was silent. And somewhere in the inner system, 1 million people had become part of something that no one was willing to name. The contact responded at 3 o'clock the next morning. I was asleep, or trying to be, when the terminal pinged. I was at the console before the second ping, reading the message on the encrypted channel. It was short, 4 lines. Asterisk hold position. Do not transmit on open channels. An associate will arrive within 72 hours. Do not approach the artifact again, asterisk. That was all. No explanation. No context. No response to my questions about the tunnel or the object. They had not even acknowledged that I had filed a report. I tried to push back. I sent a reply asking for clarification, asking for support, asking for someone to tell me what we had found. The channel went dead. The contact had cut the connection. I sat in the dark of my cabin and felt the ship around me, the hum of the life support, the vibration of the drive on standby, the slow pulse of the asteroid through the deck plates. The contact's message did not tell me to be afraid. It did not tell me to be careful. It told me to hold position and wait for someone else to arrive. That was the part that scared me most. Not the artifact, not the tunnel, not Havel's changing biometrics. The fact that someone else was coming, that someone, somewhere, knew what was in that tunnel and had already decided that it was worth sending people to retrieve. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my terminal and wrote the log entry that I would include in this record. Kopis Edda, ship's log, Yeva Dreschler-Bo commanding. Contact has gone silent. New instructions, hold position. Someone is coming. I do not know who. I do not know why. But someone knew about the tunnel before we did. Someone sent us here to find it. And now someone is coming to take it. Asterisk. Asterisk, here we go. Meloda always end up holding something someone else dropped. Asterisk. The next night, Havel had his first episode. I was in the galley at 3 o'clock, unable to sleep, when Oki came in. She was in her sleeping clothes, her hair disheveled, her face showing the exhaustion of lying in the dark for hours without rest. "Can you come?" she said. "It is Havel." I followed her to the crew quarters. The corridor was dim, the night cycle lighting, the low blue glow that told your body it was supposed to be resting. Havel's bunk was at the far end of the compartment, and when we reached it, I saw why Oki had come for me. He was standing in the corridor, facing the wall. Not bracing himself against it, not leaning, standing upright, his nose a few centimeters from the bulkhead, his hands at his sides. He was not moving. He was not making a sound. He was just standing there, facing the wall, as if he was waiting for it to tell him something. "Havel," I said. No response. I moved closer. Oki stayed back, her hand on the bulkhead, watching. I touched Havel's shoulder. The muscle under my hand was tense. He was holding himself in position, the way a man holds himself when he is trying very hard to be still. "Havel," I said again. "Talk to me." He did not turn, but his lips moved. I leaned closer. "It knows the shape of the tunnel," he said. His voice was flat, toneless, the voice of someone speaking from a dream. "Baratna, it knows the shape of the tunnel. It has always known." Then he blinked. His whole body sagged. He turned around and looked at me and Oki with confusion in his eyes. "What am I doing out here?" he said. "You were sleepwalking," Oki said. Her voice was careful, gentle. "I was." He looked at his hands. "I do not remember. I was dreaming. I dreamed about the tunnel. The walls they were moving, like breathing." "Come back to bed," I said. "We will talk about it in the morning." He nodded and went back to his bunk. I watched him lie down and close his eyes. Within a minute, his breathing had evened into the rhythm of sleep. Oki looked at me. Neither of us said anything. There was nothing to say that would not have made it more real. I went back to my cabin and sat in the dark. The ship hummed around me. Somewhere below us, the pulse was still beating in the rock. And somewhere in the inner system, a station called Eros had gone silent in a way that made the news feed sound like people trying not to scream. I pulled up the star chart on my terminal and found Eros. I zoomed out and looked at the belt, at the familiar geography of rocks and void that I had spent my entire life navigating. Somewhere in all that vastness, there was a connection between Eros and KV 1191. I could feel it the way you feel a word on the tip of your tongue, present, real, but unreachable. Two rocks, two anomalies, two things that should not be happening, and a contact who had told us to hold position and wait for someone to arrive. I closed the star chart and sat in the dark. The vents whispered. The hull creaked. Somewhere in the med bay, Havel was sleeping a sleep that was not quite sleep, and somewhere in the rock below us, the pulse was counting seconds that belonged to no clock I knew. I thought about the object in the tunnel. I thought about Havel's hand touching it, the feed flickering, the skip in the rock's pulse. I thought about the contact's message, "Do not approach the artifact again," and the fact that he had used the word artifact, which was not a word you used for a geological formation or a piece of debris. I thought about the dead in Koping, the nothing friend, the thing that Havel had told us about as a joke, the thing that lived in empty rocks and called out to people who spent too much time alone. I lay in my bunk and listened to the silence, and for the first time since we arrived at KV 1191, I realized that the silence was not silent at all. It was full of something that was listening. I did not know what it was waiting for, but I had the feeling it was about to find it. I lay in my bunk with my eyes open, watching the dark, feeling the ship breathe around me. Somewhere in the crew quarters, Havel was sleeping a sleep that was not quite sleep. Somewhere in the rock below us, the pulse was counting its slow rhythm. And somewhere beyond the belt, a station called Arrows had become a silence that the entire system was trying not to acknowledge. 3 things, 3 anomalies, and I was trapped in the middle of them, on a ship held together by stubbornness and prayer, with a crew that trusted me to know what to do. I did not know what to do. I had never known what to do. I had been pretending for 12 years, and the pretending had worked, but it was not going to work much longer. Chapter 5, Pulse. The seismic reading changed on the 4th day. Kitano brought it to me in the galley, where I was going over the supply inventory with Peta. He set his tablet on the table and did not say anything. He just pointed at the waveform display. The pulse was still there, still regular, but the interval had changed. The 47-second rhythm had shifted to something faster, 41 seconds now, measured across a 12-hour window. And the amplitude had increased. The compression wave was stronger. The rock was beating harder. It changed after Havel touched the object, Kitano said. Not immediately. It took about 6 hours to stabilize at the new rate. But the correlation is undeniable. That is not a correlation, I said. That is a coincidence. Boss Mang. Kitano's voice was patient, the way you speak to someone who is refusing to see what is in front of them. I have been tracking this pulse since the moment we arrived. It was stable at 47 seconds for 72 hours. Havel touched the object. 6 hours later, the pulse accelerated to 41 seconds and found a new stable rhythm. That is not coincidence. Something changed because of what he did. I looked at the waveform. The spikes marched across the display in perfect, even intervals. A heartbeat. I could not stop thinking of it as a heartbeat anymore. Is it still stable now? I asked. Yes, at the new rate. But he hesitated. But what? He pulled up another display. The interval between Havel's episodes. The sleepwalking, the standing at the wall. The first episode happened at approximately 3 o'clock on the night of day 4. If you measure the interval between that and the next, we do not have a next one yet, but if the pattern holds, it will match the pulse. Yes. I stared at the display. The pulse data. Havel's biometrics. The time of his first episode. They lined up. Not perfectly, but close enough to make my stomach clench. You are telling me Havel's episodes are synchronizing with the rock. I am telling you the data supports that interpretation. I am not telling you I understand why. I pushed the tablet back across the table. I did not want to look at it anymore. But the image was burned into my retinas. The marching spikes, the regular intervals, the thing that was happening in the rock and was now happening inside one of my crew. Keep monitoring, I said. Do not tell Havel. Kitano nodded and left. Peta, who had been silent throughout, watched him go. Then him turned to me. I sat alone in the galley for a long time after Kitano left. The pulse data was still on the display. I watched the waveform cycle through its 41-second pattern, over and over, the spikes marching across the screen with the mechanical regularity of a machine. Synchronization. That was the word Kitano had used. It implied a connection, a link between two systems that should have been independent. Havel and the rock and the pulse. The pulse and the episodes. I thought about what would happen if the synchronization continued. If Havel's episodes became more frequent, if the pulse accelerated further, if the two rhythms merged into one. I pushed the thought away and went to check on the rest of the crew. I should run full medicals on everyone. Why? Because if something is affecting Havel, it might affect the rest of us. And I want a baseline before anything changes. Not everyone is in the rock, Peta. Havel is the only one who touched it. I know, but I checked the environmental sensors this morning. The air is normal. Radiation levels normal. Temperature normal. Everything is normal. But the crew is not normal. Oki has been sleeping 3 hours a night. Kitano has been writing in his journal for hours at a time. Havel is, well, you know, and you have had circles under your eyes for 2 days. I always have circles under my eyes. I know, these ones are different. I looked at Peta. IMS' face was unreadable, as always. But there was something in IMS' voice, a tightness, a concern that him was trying to keep contained. Do it, I said. Start with Havel. The medicals took most of the day. Peta set up in the med bay and called each crew member in one at a time. Standard battery, vitals, blood work, neural scan, bone density. I went fourth, after Oki and Kitano. My results were unremarkable. Calcium levels low, as expected for a belter. Bone density reduced, as expected. No anomalies. I watched Oki go through the medical bay before me. She sat still while Peta ran the scanner over her, but her hands were never at rest. She was tapping her thigh, pressing her palm against the bed frame, feeling the vibration of the ship through the metal while M worked. She caught me watching and gave me a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. She knew something was wrong. We all knew. We were just waiting for the data to confirm what our bodies were already telling us. Havel went last. He was cheerful about it, making jokes about Peta's bedside manner, asking if the med bay had any of the good painkillers. Peta smiled and went through the motions and sent him back to work. On the monitor, I watched Havel leave and walk down the corridor, and I noticed that his gait had changed, a slight hesitation in his left step, a pause that was not quite a stumble, but was not natural either. The walk of a man who was not entirely sure where his feet were going to land. Then Im came to my cabin. Havel's results are normal, Im said. I waited. There was a but in the air. But I ran his blood work 3 times. His white cell count is slightly elevated. Not enough to be concerning on its own. His neural activity, though, I ran a full brain scan. The pattern is different. Different how? It is not a pattern I have ever seen. His brain is active in regions that should not be active simultaneously. There is cross-hemisphere communication happening at a level that should not be possible in a conscious human being. He is processing information from multiple sensory streams at once, and I cannot tell what those streams are. Could it be a pre-existing condition? I checked his records. Nothing. He has the neural profile of a healthy 61-year-old belter male with no significant pre-existing conditions. This is new. I sat back in my chair. The cabin was quiet. But he is fine, I said. Functioning, talking, working. Yes, functioning normally by every external measure. But his brain is doing something that brains should not do, and I do not know what it means. Peta left. I sat alone in the dark and tried to find a thread of logic in the tangle of data we had collected. The pulse, the object, Havel's changing brain, the contact silence, the message that someone was coming. I could not find the thread, but I could feel it, somewhere below conscious thought, the shape of something that was pulling these threads together, knotting them into a pattern I could not yet see. That night, Oki found the crack. She came to me at 2200 hours, face pale, hands dirty. She had been doing a routine structural survey in the engineering section, something she did every few days, running her palms along the bulkheads and listening to the ship's voice through her fingers. There is a crack in the inner hull, she said, in the aft storage compartment, near the port side bulkhead. Structural damage? No, that is what is strange. It is on the inner surface only. It does not go through to the outer hull. It is like something is growing. A deposit. A formation. It is about 4 centimeters long, and it is getting longer. Growing. I marked it this morning. I checked it an hour ago. It has extended by about 2 millimeters. That is too fast for any kind of normal material degradation. I followed her to the aft storage compartment. The crack was exactly where she had said, a thin line in the bulkhead, barely visible in the dim lighting. I ran my finger along it. The surface was rough, not like a fracture, but like a seam, like something had pushed through from behind the metal and was beginning to emerge. Composition: unknown. I scraped a sample and ran it through the analyzer. The result did not match anything in the database. It is carbonaceous, but it has a crystalline structure that does not match any known carbon allotrope. Seal it. Cover it. Monitor it. That is all you want me to do? I looked at her. The fear in her eyes was real, but I did not have a better answer. We were holding position. Someone was coming. We had an artifact in a tunnel and a crew member whose brain was changing and a crack in the hull that was growing. What else can we do? I said. She did not have an answer either. She sealed the crack with a patch of thermal epoxy, covering it with a sheet of metal bonded to the surrounding hull. It would hold, she said, for now, but she would need to check it again in the morning. I stood in the storage compartment after she left and looked at the patched section of bulkhead. The epoxy was still tacky, gleaming dully in the light. I put my hand on it and felt nothing unusual, just the surface of the ship, the familiar texture of the hull that had kept the void out for 20 years. But I knew what was underneath, something that should not be there, something that was growing. What else can we do? I said to the empty compartment. The ship did not answer. That night, Kitano went back into the tunnel alone. I did not know he had gone until I checked the suit bay log at 2 o'clock and found one suit signed out. I pulled up the locator and saw his signal in the borehole, already past the entry point, moving through the tunnel toward the chamber. I did not call him back. I do not know why. Maybe because I understood he needed to go. Maybe because I was too tired to argue. Maybe because some part of me wanted to know what he would find. He was gone for 2 hours. I spent those 2 hours on the bridge, watching his locator signal move through the tunnel system, deeper and then deeper still, following a path that our survey had not mapped but that the rock seemed to provide for him. He did not hesitate at any junction. He moved through the tunnels like a man walking through his own home, familiar with every turn, every branch, every shift in the corridor's width. He reached the chamber at 3:40. His signal stopped at the coordinates we had marked as the location of the device, and then it stayed there for an hour and 10 minutes. I did not call him. I wanted to. I watched the signal sit in that chamber, and I imagined him in the dark, facing the object, his hands extended or at his sides or pressed against the platform. I imagined the vibration moving through him. I imagined the patterns in the walls shifting as he breathed, and I stayed silent. When he came back, he went straight to his bunk and wrote in his journal for 40 minutes without stopping. I watched him on the corridor camera. He was writing fast, filling pages, his hand moving with a speed that suggested he was not composing but transcribing, writing down something that was being dictated to him. 8 pages. Then he closed the journal, put it in his locker, and slept. I went to his bunk and stood over him. In the dim night cycle light, his face was relaxed in a way I had not seen since before we arrived at KV 1191. The tension that had been living in his jaw, in the set of his shoulders, in the furrow between his eyebrows, all of it was gone. He looked younger. He looked peaceful. He looked like a man who had found something he had been searching for his entire life. I wanted to wake him. I wanted to ask him what he had seen in that chamber, what he had written in those 8 pages, what the rock had told him. But I did not, because I was afraid of the answer. He slept better than he had in days. I know because I watched the sleep monitor from my terminal. The neural activity smoothed into deep rest, heart rate stable, breathing even. He looked, on the monitor, like a man who had finally found peace. And that was the most frightening thing of all. I did not sleep. I sat at my terminal and wrote. Asterisk pulse has accelerated. Hobble's episodes are synchronizing with it. Kitano spent 2 hours alone in the chamber and came back writing pages he will not share. Oki found a crack in the hull that is growing. The contact is silent. Someone is coming, but they have not arrived yet. Asterisk. Asterisk, I do not know what we have found in this rock, but I am beginning to understand that it is not a thing we found. It is a thing that found us. Asterisk. Asterisk Melota are the ones who came to the door. And now the door is opening. Asterisk. I closed the terminal and sat in the dark. Somewhere below me, the rock was pulsing. Somewhere in the ship, a crack was growing. Somewhere in the inner system, a station called Eros had already fallen silent, and no one was telling us why. Through the wall, I could hear the faint sound of Kitano's breathing in the bunk next to mine. He was sleeping the deep, untroubled sleep of a man who had made his peace with something. 8 pages. He had written 8 pages in his journal after coming back from the chamber, and he would not show them to anyone. I thought about what those pages might contain. I thought about the patterns on the walls of the chamber, the way they had shifted when we moved. I thought about the vibration in the deck plates, the crack in the bulkhead, the pulse that was now beating at 41-second intervals. And I sat in my cabin on a tired water hauler in the outer belt, holding position around a rock that did not want to let us go. The night was not quiet. It was never quiet anymore. The ship hummed, the vents whispered, and somewhere below me, deep in the rock, the pulse was still beating. Faster now than it had been when we arrived. Stronger, more insistent. I put my hand on the bulkhead and felt it through the metal. A rhythm, a heartbeat. The ship was responding to it now. I could tell by the way the vents cycled, the way the deck plates carried the vibration, the way the entire vessel had begun to resonate at a frequency that was not its own. I was beginning to think that Kitano was right about the rocks being alive, and that was the most frightening thought of all. Because if the rocks were alive, then the thing we had found in the tunnel was not an artifact. It was a part of something, a voice, a heart, a mind. And we had woken it up. Chapter 6, Havel Goes. I woke to Oki's hand on my shoulder and the sound of her voice saying my name in a tone I had never heard from her before. Yeva, wake up. Havel is gone. I was out of the bunk before I was fully conscious, following her down the corridor to the crew quarters. The lights were on full brightness. The night cycle had been overridden. Pita was standing in the corridor outside Havel's bunk, holding a tablet. Kitano was at the comm station, cycling through channels. When? I said. Sometime in the last 3 hours. Oki's voice was under control, but barely. I checked on him at 2 o'clock. He was in his bunk, sleeping, or appearing to sleep. At 4:30, I came back to check the crack in aft storage, and I noticed his bunk was empty. I searched the ship, every compartment. He is not here. The suit bay. Still there. All of them accounted for. I checked the log myself, scrolling through the entries, my fingers cold on the terminal surface. Every suit signed in. Every locker sealed. The door log showed no EVA exit. The airlock had not cycled. He had not left the ship through any means that the ship could record. Then where is he? Pita said from the doorway. IMS voice was quiet, professional, but I heard the strain underneath. I did not answer. I went to the locator terminal and pulled up his chip. The display showed a signal, steady and clear, at a depth of approximately 120 meters inside KV 1191, in a section of rock that our survey had never mapped. I felt the cold start in my chest and spread outward. The locator chip. Oki pulled up the display on Pita's tablet. The locator chip was a standard implant for belters working in high-risk environments, a subcutaneous transponder in the forearm, pingable by any ship's system. Havel's locator was active, responding, transmitting. At a depth of approximately 120 meters inside KV 1191, in a section of rock that our survey had never mapped. That is not possible, I said. He did not take a suit. He did not take any equipment. He walked into the borehole in his sleeping clothes and traveled 120 meters into the rock without a suit, without light, without any life support, and he is still alive. His biometrics are transmitting. His heart is beating. He is breathing. Somehow. I looked at the display again. The signal was steady, not moving. Havel was sitting, or standing, or lying. The locator could not tell me which. In a chamber that did not exist when we arrived at this rock. 3 suits, I said. 3 lights. We are going in. I did not tell anyone to stay behind because I knew no one would follow it. We suited up in silence, 4 of us, because someone had to stay on the ship, and that someone was going to be PETA. IMS medical training would be needed when we brought Havel back, and if something went wrong, it would be the one to call for help that might not come. The tunnel had changed. I noticed it the moment I entered the borehole. The first thing was the temperature. The walls were warmer than they had been 3 days ago. Not hot, just alive. The temperature of living skin. The surface that I touched through my gloves had a faint give to it, a resilience, as if the rock was not quite solid anymore. Is it me? Oki said over the comm, or is the tunnel different? It is different, Kitano confirmed. I remember the geometry from the first survey. The walls have shifted. The diameter is not the same. We moved forward. Oki led because she always led, her helmet light cutting through the darkness and illuminating walls that reflected the beam in ways I did not remember. The tunnel had grown, not in a structural sense. The bore was still sound, but the surface had become more defined, more intricate, as if the rock had developed a grain, a pattern, a structure that had been invisible during our first entry. At the first junction, I saw what Oki meant. The main tunnel continued straight ahead, but to the left, a new passage had opened, a smaller tunnel, barely wide enough for a suited figure, that angled downward into the rock. The walls were smoother than the main tunnel, newer, as if they had been grown in the days since our first survey. Follow the locator signal, I said. The locator led us through the new passage. The floor sloped downward at a steady 15-degree angle. The walls were close enough to brush against both shoulders simultaneously, and the sensation was not claustrophobia. I have been in tighter spaces, but intimacy. The tunnel felt like it was pressing in, not to crush but to hold, to embrace, to make contact. I could feel Oki ahead of me, her breathing steady in my helmet speakers. She moved with the same certainty Kitano had shown the night before, no hesitation at the junctions, no pauses to check the locator. She knew the way, not because she had been here before, but because the rock was telling her. The walls were guides, the patterns on their surfaces a language that her hands were reading without her conscious mind's involvement. Do you feel that? Kitano said. Feel what? The sound, through the walls. I pressed my helmet against the wall, and I heard it, not through the air, through the bone of my skull, through the structure of my suit. A low vibration, rhythmic, the pulse, but closer now, more immediate, as if the rock was not just conducting it but producing it, generating it in the walls around us. It is louder than before, Oki said. I can feel it in my whole body. The rock is vibrating at the same frequency as the pulse. Keep moving. We followed the signal deeper. My suit chronometer said 23 minutes, but it felt longer. The tunnel twisted and branched, and at each junction, the locator led us unerringly along a path we had never taken, through a section of the asteroid that should not have existed. The walls grew warmer. The vibration grew stronger. The light from our helmets seemed to dim, absorbed by the rock in ways that made the darkness ahead feel thicker, more substantial. Then we reached the chamber. It was not the same chamber where we had found the object. This one was larger, maybe 20 meters across, with walls that curved into a dome overhead. The surface of the walls was covered in patterns. Not carvings, not writing, but patterns like the grain of wood, like flow lines of a liquid frozen in motion. They caught the light and threw it back in fractured rainbows that shifted as we moved our heads. And in the center of the chamber, Havel was sitting. Cross-legged on the floor, hands resting on his knees, eyes open. He was wearing the clothes he had slept in, a thin shirt and loose trousers. No suit, no helmet, no life support of any kind. He was not breathing in any way that I could see, but his chest was rising and falling at a rhythm that matched the pulse of the rock. I approached him slowly. The patterns on the walls shifted as I moved, responding to my presence, tracking my progress across the chamber floor. I knelt beside him and put my hand on his shoulder. Havel. His eyes moved. They tracked to my face and focused. He was aware of me. He was present, but he did not speak. "Can you stand?" No response. His eyes were on my face, but they did not seem to be seeing me. They were seeing through me, past me, into something that existed on the other side of the visible world. Oki came up beside me and touched Havel's hand. I watched her face as she did it. The way her expression changed from concentration to something else, something I can only describe as recognition. "His skin," she said. "Look at his skin." I looked. In the helmet light, his skin had a faint iridescence, a thin sheen of color that shifted as I moved my head. Oil on water, a film of something that was not quite there, that disappeared when you looked directly at it, that existed only in peripheral vision. "What is that?" "I do not know, but his vitals." She was checking the portable scanner she had brought. "He is alive. Heart rate 40 beats per minute. Breathing shallow. Neural activity present. But the pattern, it is not human anymore. Not any pattern I have seen." "Can we move him?" "We can try." It took all three of us. Havel was limp, but not unconscious. His body moved when we moved him, but he did not assist. His eyes tracked us as we lifted him, as we positioned him for the carry. He made no sound. His breathing did not change. I took his shoulders. Oki took one leg, Kitano the other. We carried him out of the chamber and into the tunnel, and as we moved, I felt the walls watching. The vibration changed pitch. The pulse accelerated. The rock knew we were taking him, and it was not stopping us, but it was acknowledging, notifying, sending a signal we could not interpret. The journey back was harder. The tunnel seemed longer. The branches that had been clear on the way and were confusing on the way out. The walls looked the same from every angle, and the locator signal from Havel's chip was no help because it was coming from him, not from the ship. At every junction, I had to stop and think, to reconstruct the path we had taken, to remember which turns led upward and which led deeper into the rock. At one point, we took a wrong turn. The passage narrowed as we moved forward, the walls pressing closer until I could feel them against both shoulders simultaneously. The vibration in the rock intensified until I could feel it in my teeth, a low thrumming that seemed to come from inside my own skull. Oki's breathing was loud in my helmet speakers. Kitano was saying something under his breath, a prayer, I think, or a chant in the Mons tradition. "Back," I said. "This is not the way." We reversed, carrying Havel's dead weight through the narrowing passage, and found the correct branch. I checked the locator. The ship was still above us, still transmitting its homing signal. We had lost 10 minutes. We reached the borehole. The vertical shaft stretched above us, a cylinder of darkness that seemed to go on forever. We positioned Havel for the ascent, Oki and Kitano below, pushing, me above, pulling. We carried him up 1 meter at a time, our arms burning with the effort of passing his limp body through the narrow vertical space. The walls of the shaft were warm against my back. The vibration was everywhere now, filling my body, making my teeth ache. Halfway up, I looked down. The light from Kitano's helmet showed the shaft descending into darkness below us, and for a moment I thought I saw something moving in the shadows at the bottom. Not Havel. We had Havel. Something else. A shape. A shift in the darkness that was not quite darkness. I blinked and it was gone. "Keep moving," Oki said. She had seen it too. Neither of us spoke about it. We reached the surface. The airlock cycled closed behind us, sealing the rock away, and I collapsed against the inner hatch and felt the tears come. Not from sadness, from relief, from the sudden release of the tension I had been holding since I saw his empty bunk. We got him to the med bay. PETA ran every test him had. The results were the same as before. Havel was alive, stable, and physically healthy by every measure medical science could apply. His brain was active. His organs were functioning. He was, by any standard definition, fine. But he was not there. He lay in the med bay bunk with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. When I spoke to him, his eyes tracked to my face. When Oki held his hand, his fingers curled around hers. But he did not speak. He did not blink at the right intervals. He breathed at a rhythm that matched a pulse that was not his own. He is not in there, Oki said. She was sitting beside his bunk, holding his hand. Or maybe he is. But he is somewhere else too. What do you mean? When I held his hand, it felt like the hand was holding back. Like he was present enough to know I was there. But he was also somewhere else. And the somewhere else was more real to him than this. I stood in the doorway of the med bay and looked at my crew. Havel in the bunk, breathing at a rhythm that was not his own. Oki beside him, holding his hand, her face streaked with tears she was trying not to shed. Kitano in the corner, silent, his lips moving in a prayer I did not recognize. Peta at the terminal, running scans that kept confirming what we already knew. I have seen this before, Peta said. IMS' voice was barely audible. Not this exactly. But the pattern, the way his brain is active but not responsive, it matches reports from the Phoebe incident. The science team that disappeared. The ones they found later. The ones who were still alive but not there anymore. This is what they looked like. You knew that pattern before you ran the scans, I said. You knew what you were looking for. Peta did not deny it. I was trained to recognize it. Trained. The word came out flat. Trained by who? The people who put you on my ship. Yes. I looked at him for a long moment. There was a conversation we needed to have, and it was coming, but it was not going to happen in the med bay with Havel's empty body between us. Everyone out, I said. Oki stays with Havel. Kitano, get some rest. Peta, we will talk later. They moved to obey, and I watched them go. Kitano paused at the door and looked back at Havel. His lips moved, one of his Mon's prayers, the ones he used for the rocks. Then he left. I stood alone in the doorway. Havel lay in the bunk, staring at nothing. The pulse was audible now, if you listened. A low thrum through every surface. The contact had been silent for 36 hours. The associate who was coming had not arrived. And the man who had been our pampa, who had carried a chipped ceramic mug for 30 years and told stories in the galley and filled every room he entered with his presence, was lying in a bed with his eyes open, breathing in time with a rock that was 4 kilometers across and full of tunnels that should not exist. I went to my cabin and sat down at my terminal. I did not write for a long time. Then I wrote. Asterisk, bossman gone quiet. That is how you know the cowl's running out. Asterisk. I sat in the dark after the words were written. The ship hummed around me. Somewhere in the med bay, Havel was breathing in time with a pulse that was not his own. Somewhere in the rock below us, the tunnels were growing. And somewhere on the way to us, the associate the contact had promised was coming closer. I did not know what would happen when they arrived. I did not know if they would help us or silence us or something in between. All I knew was that we had a man who was not a man anymore, a rock that was not a rock, and a ship that was beginning to change in ways that Oki could not explain. The pulse counted its seconds. I counted with it. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 41, and then back to 1. I did not sleep that night. I have not slept properly since. Chapter 7. What Eros Did. The news broke at 9 o'clock on the 5th day, and it broke the way bad news always breaks in the belt. Not through official channels, but through whispernets and back channels, and the kind of communication that happens between people who learned long ago that the official channels will lie to you. Kitano picked it up first. He was monitoring the OPA encrypted frequencies, the ones that the faction networks used to share information the inner planets did not want shared. He had been scanning those channels since the contact went silent, looking for any word about KV 1191, about the associate who was coming, about the artifact we had found. Instead, he found Eros. He called me to the bridge. His voice was strange, not afraid, but hollow, the voice of someone receiving information that has not yet become real. Bossman, he said, you need to see this. The display showed a text feed from one of the OPA intelligence nodes, relayed through 4 hops, and encrypted with codes that Kitano had cracked years ago. The message was short, and it said things I read 3 times before I believed them. Eros Station had been exposed to something biological or biological adjacent. The inner planets were calling it a contamination event, but the words they used did not match the scale of what the OPA channels were reporting. Hundreds of thousands dead was the first number I saw. Then the correction came. Not dead. Transformed. The message went into detail that made my stomach turn. People on Eros had been absorbed into the station structure. The walls had grown around them. The station systems were operating without human input. The population was no longer a population. It was a component, a material, a part of whatever the station was becoming. And then the worst part. The station was no longer responding to any communication. It was, and this was the phrase that made my hands go numb, no longer in its expected orbital position. Eros station had moved, not through any known propulsion method, not through any human intervention. The station had changed its trajectory under its own power, as if the rock itself had decided to go somewhere. 1 million people, and the rock was flying itself toward the inner system with them still inside. I read the message again, and again. My hands were shaking. The words would not stay still in my brain. Millions of people, Kitano said. His voice was quiet. 1 million people on that station. And it just left. Where did it go? Venus, I said. The word came out before I had consciously formed it. The trajectory, if it changed course toward the inner system. There are no confirmed reports of destination. The inner planets are not sharing that data. But the WhisperNets say Venus. They say it is heading for Venus. I stood in the middle of the bridge and felt the Kopis Edda around me. The humming of the life support, the whisper of the vents, the pulse of the rock through the deck plates. 1 million people, a station the size of a small city, moving under its own power toward Venus. None of it made sense. None of it fit into any framework I had for understanding the universe. Call everyone to the galley, I said. We need to talk. They came. Oki from engineering, Peta from the med bay, the empty shell of Havel lying in his bunk, with Oki's handprint still on his. Kitano brought the display and set it on the galley table. We sat around it the way we had sat around 100 meals, but nobody was hungry. I told them what Kitano had found. I read the message aloud, and as I read, I watched their faces. Oki went pale. Not the pale of fear, the pale of someone doing rapid calculations, fitting new information into a framework she had been building since the moment she first touched the object. Her hands were flat on the table, palms down, feeling the vibration of the ship through the surface. Kitano was already praying. His lips moved silently, his fingers tracing patterns on his thigh, the Mon's gestures, the ones he used when he was communing with the rocks. Peta's face was still, completely still, the stillness of someone trying very hard not to show what they are feeling. And in that stillness, I saw something that I should have seen before. Peta was not surprised. You knew, I said. The words hung in the air. The crew turned to look at Peta. IMS' face did not change, but the silence that followed my question was longer than it should have been, and in that silence, everything shifted. Not about Eros, Peta said slowly. I did not know about Eros. Not specifically. But you knew something. Peta looked at me. I saw him make a decision. I saw it happen in IMS eyes, the calculation of how much to say and how much to hold back. I had seen that look before, on the faces of people preparing to lie. But Peta did not lie. I knew there were patterns, Peta said. Anomalies. The OPA cell I work for calls them residue events. They flagged KV 1191 before we ever got the contract. The seismic signature. The missing debris. They arranged the survey job. Needed a crew that would look without asking why. How did you know that? Peta did not answer. The silence told the story. Peta, Oki said. How? Because I was placed on this ship 8 months ago to watch for it. The words hit like a decompression event. 8 months. Every meal. Every watch. Every quiet conversation. The slow accumulation of trust that turns strangers into a crew, built on a lie. Who placed you? An OPA intelligence cell. They track anomalies connected to the protomolecule. That is the word for it. The thing on Eros. The thing on Phoebe. What we found in that chamber is part of the same network. A node. A relay. Something built before there were humans to build anything. Oki stood up. Her chair scraped against the deck. She walked to the bulkhead and put her hand against it, grounding herself. 8 months. And you never said anything. I could not. The people I work for, they are not the kind who tolerate loose ends. Loose ends, I said. Havel is lying in a bunk with his eyes open and a brain running at a frequency that should not exist. The hull is growing cracks in a pattern that matches the tunnel. Eros just flew itself to Venus. What part of this sounds like we were ever anything but loose ends? Peter did not answer. The question hung in the air like the taste of something wrong. None of us had an answer. The silence was broken by a sound from the corridor. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. We turned. Havel was standing in the doorway of the galley. He was wearing the same clothes we had put him in, loose medical pants and a thin shirt. His feet were bare. His hair was disheveled. He looked like a man who had just woken from a very long sleep, except his eyes were not the eyes of someone who had been sleeping. They were the eyes of someone who had been somewhere else and had come back changed. Havel, I said. He looked at me. His gaze was clear, focused, present in a way it had not been since before the chamber. Eros is going home, he said. His voice was Havel's voice. The same tone, the same cadence, the same belter accent I had heard tell 1,000 stories over 1,000 meals. But the words were not Havel's words. What did you say? Eros is going home. Sasako, it is going home. He smiled. It was Havel's smile, the same warm, crooked grin he had worn for 12 years. But there was something behind it that I had never seen before. Understanding. Peace. The expression of a man who has figured out the answer to a question that has bothered him his entire life. Then his eyes went blank again. The smile faded. He turned and walked back to the med bay, climbed into his bunk, and lay down. By the time we reached him, his eyes were closed and his breathing had returned to the rhythm of the pulse. I stood in the doorway of the med bay and looked at him. Then I looked at Peter. The device, I said. The object in the chamber. Where is it? Peter checked the survey log. I watched him scroll through the records, the geological data, the scanner outputs, the image files from the probe. I saw IMS face change as him realized what had happened. Him checked again, scrolling faster this time, pulling up file after file. It was not there. Every digital record of the object had been erased. The survey log showed the chamber as empty. The scanner records showed nothing but rock. The image files showed a dark space with nothing in the center. The data that Oki had spent hours analyzing, the data that showed an object that changed its properties when you looked at it, all of it gone, clean from the system as if it had never existed. It is not a deletion, Peter said. A deletion leaves traces, log entries, system markers. It is as if the data never existed. As if the object reached backward through the storage and removed every instance of itself from every device that was connected to the ship's network. The only records remaining are the ones that were never digital. My log, a handwritten notebook in my cabin, filled with the cramped script I had been using since I was 15 years old. Kitano's journal, the one he wrote in every night, the pages covered in ink that had come from a physical pen. The things that existed on paper, on surfaces that were not connected to anything, that had never been digitized, that could not be reached by whatever process had cleaned the object from our systems. I went to my cabin and checked my notebook. The log entries were still there. My account of the tunnel, the object, Havel's touch, the pulse. Every word I had written by hand was still on the page, in my own handwriting, the ink unchanged. The digital world had been scrubbed clean, but the physical world remembered. The object had erased itself from our data. It had reached through the ship's network and removed every trace of its existence. Every digital photograph, every scanner reading, every word that had been typed into a terminal. The only evidence that it had ever been in that chamber was what we had written by hand, what we carried in our memories, and what the rock itself contained in its growing tunnels. and Havel had woken up long enough to tell us that Eros was going home. I went back to my cabin and sat at my terminal. I did not know what to write. I did not know what to think, but I wrote anyway, because writing was the only thing that made the world make sense. I put my notebook on the desk and opened it to a fresh page. The pen was an old one, a physical cartridge pen that I had carried for years, the ink running dry. I shook it and wrote. Asterisk, the news has broken about Eros. 1 million people. A station that moved. Havel woke up long enough to tell us it is going home. Home. Wherever that is. Asterisk. Asterisk, the device is gone. Not from the rock, from every record we have. The only things left are what I wrote by hand, and what Kitano wrote in his journal. Asterisk. Asterisk, PETA has been lying since the day M joined the ship. Not maliciously. M was following orders. But the lie is there, and now it is between us, and I do not know if we can put it back. Asterisk. Asterisk, I am sitting in the dark of my cabin, writing this by hand, because I do not trust the ship's network anymore. I do not know what the object is. I do not know what the rock is. I do not know what Havel has become. Asterisk. Asterisk, but I know that Eros is going home, and I know that somewhere in this rock, there is something that was waiting for this moment. Asterisk. I think the waiting is over. Here we go. The pen was running out of ink. I shook it and wrote the last line, pressing hard to get the words onto the page. Asterisk, Melota found something in the dark, Baratna. And now the dark knows we are here. Asterisk. I closed the notebook and sat in the silence of my cabin. The pulse was there, underneath everything. The rock was speaking, and for the first time, I was trying to listen. Through the wall, I could hear the ship settling around me. The creak of the hull, the whisper of the vents, the low thrum of the drive and standby. And underneath all of it, the pulse. 41 seconds. A rhythm that was not random, not geological, not anything that belonged to the ordinary world. I thought about Havel standing in the doorway, speaking in a voice that was his and not his. Asterisk, Eros is going home. Sasako? It's going home. Asterisk. I did not know where home was, but I had the terrible feeling that we were going to find out. Chapter 8. PETA's Silence. I was not asleep. I had stopped trying to sleep around midnight, when the ship's cycle had dimmed the lights to their night setting, and I had spent the first 2 hours lying on my bunk with my eyes open, watching the ceiling, thinking about Havel in the med bay, not dead, not alive, something between, and about the device that no longer existed in any record I could access. The ship was quiet. Not the normal quiet, the hum and whisper quiet that means everything is running correctly. A different quiet. The quiet of a crew that has stopped talking because there is nothing left to say that will not make things worse. I was in the galley, nursing a cup of cold tea that I had not drunk, when Oki found me. She did not knock. She does not knock. Not because she is rude, but because she does not think of doors as barriers. She opened the hatch and stood in the frame, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. Oki vibrates at all times. That nervous energy is her baseline, but this was different. She was still, completely still. That is when Oki is most afraid. I found something, she said. I waited. The communications logs. I went through them. Manual audit. I could not sleep and I needed to do something with my hands, so I started pulling the transmission records from the past 8 months. 8 months. That was before KV 1191, before the contract, before any of this. PETA, I said. She nodded. Encrypted transmissions. Regular. Every 3 to 4 days, going back to before him joined the crew. The encryption is not standard OPA. It is military grade. I had to run it through 3 decryption algorithms just to confirm the handshake protocol, and I still cannot read the content. I set down the cold tea. My hands were steady. I did not feel steady. How many? Over 60. The first one was sent 2 days before him signed on with us. 2 days before. That meant PETA had been placed. The quiet medic who had joined our crew 8 months ago, who had treated our injuries and calibrated our medical bay, and sat with Havel during his first night in the med bay, holding his hand and monitoring his vitals. Peter had been on someone's mission from the beginning. "Do not tell anyone else," I said. "Boss Mang." "Not yet. I need to think." But I did not need to think. I knew what I was going to do. I needed to do it before I lost my nerve. The walk to the med bay took 30 seconds. 30 seconds of ship corridor with Oki behind me, her footsteps matching mine, the ship humming around us, the lights dim and warm. 30 seconds to prepare myself to confront a person I had trusted with my crew's lives. Peter was sitting on the edge of the bunk in the med bay, next to Havel's still form, and was holding Havel's hand, the same way Oki had seen him do it before, monitoring, waiting. The lights in the med bay were set to their lowest setting because Havel did not respond well to bright light anymore. His eyes tracked movement, but they seemed pained by direct illumination. The medical monitors beeped their slow, steady rhythm. Peter looked up when we entered. IM's face was calm. That was the worst part. Him looked at me and at Oki, and him knew. I could see it in IM's eyes, the moment of recognition, the understanding that the game was over. And him did not flinch. "Yeva," Peter said, quietly, not a question. "Sit still," I said. "Do not move." I locked the hatch behind me. The med bay is small. A bed for Havel. A second fold-down bunk that Peter had been using since we brought Havel back. A cabinet of medical supplies. A desk terminal. A storage locker. For people made it crowded. I stood by the door. Oki stood to my left, arms crossed, vibrating with tension. Peter sat on the edge of the bunk, still holding Havel's hand. "The transmissions," I said. 8 months. Encrypted. Military-grade handshake. 2 days before you joined us. Peter closed IM's eyes, just for a moment. When him opened them, there was something in IM's face that I had never seen before. Not guilt, not fear. Something heavier. Something that looked like exhaustion. "Yes," Im said. "Just that. Yes." "Who do you work for?" "An OPA intelligence cell." IM's voice was steady, professional, the voice of someone who has rehearsed this confession. They operate independently of the major factions. They have tracked what they call residue events for 18 months, anomalies in the outer belt. The first confirmed site was a rock designated VM 442. Survey team went in. Went dark. Recovery crew found the tunnels empty. Ship intact. Logs clean for 4 days, then nothing. I felt Oki shift beside me. The air in the med bay felt thick. NKV 1191. The second confirmed site. Peter set Havel's hand down gently, laying it across his chest. Him turned to face me fully. "My handlers identified it 6 weeks before the contract was offered to you. They found the pattern in the geological survey data, the subsurface density anomalies, the thermal signatures that should not exist in a cold rock. They needed a crew to get close. A legitimate crew. A crew that would not raise suspicion. So they placed you on my ship." "Yes." "How?" "The contract for the Tambalane run was already in motion. My handlers created a vacancy in your crew manifest. The previous medic, Denny Rostova, was offered a position on a series medical ship that paid 3 times what you could afford. She accepted. I was introduced through a mutual contact. You ran a background check. It came back clean because it was designed to come back clean." Denny. I remembered now. She had left suddenly, apologetic, saying the series job was too good to pass up. I had wished her well. I had never thought to question it. "The device," I said. "You knew it was here." I knew there was something. I did not know what. My handlers did not know what. The instructions were to observe, document, and report. Not to engage. Not to touch. Not to remove. "Then why?" Oki said, and her voice cracked. "Why did you not tell us? Before Havel touched it. Before any of this. You could have told us what we were walking into." Peter looked at Oki. For the first time, IM's composure wavered. Just slightly. A flicker in the eyes. "Because I was told you were acceptable loss." The words hung in the air. The crew of the Kopis Edda, Peter said slowly, was classified as a non-critical asset. The mission directive was to gather data. If the crew was compromised, if the ship was lost, the data would still reach my handlers. I was the data carrier. The ship was the transport. You were considered, how did they phrase it, a tolerable variable. Oki made a sound. A small sound, barely audible. The sound of someone who has been punched in the stomach. Tolerable, I said. Yes. 8 months on my ship, eating my food, breathing my air, treating my crew, sitting at my table, and we were tolerable. Yes. I wanted to hit him. I have never hit a member of my crew. I have never wanted to. I wanted to in that moment with an intensity that surprised me. The anger was not hot. It was cold, deep, the kind of cold that settles into your bones and does not leave. What is the device? Peter shook IM's head. I do not know. That is the truth. My handlers believe it is a receiver, a node in the same network that built the thing on Eros. Something dormant. Something we woke up. Eros, I said. You knew before the news broke. I knew there was something. I did not know the scale. My handlers tried to alert OPA leadership. No one listened. The protomolecule. I had heard the word on the whisper nets, spoken in the tones reserved for things too large to comprehend. Something that had transformed Eros. Something that had made a station move under its own power. And we had found a piece of it. You should have told me, I said. Yes. You should have trusted me. Yes. Answer me honestly, Peter. Did you care about any of us? Or was it all the mission? Peter looked at me. For a long moment, and said nothing. The monitors beeped. The ship hummed. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the hull, the rock was waiting. I joined this crew because I was ordered to, Peter said. I stayed because I wanted to. The mission was the reason I came. You are the reason I did not leave. I care about this crew. I care about Oki, and Kitano, and Havel. I care about you. That is not a lie. That is the part of this that was never part of the mission. It should have made me feel better. It did not. Is lying, Oki said. Her voice was flat. We cannot trust anything him says. She is right to say that, Peter said. You should not trust me. I do not expect you to trust me. But I am telling you the truth now. The device is dangerous. The rock is dangerous. And there are people coming to collect both. What people? My handlers. They dispatched a team as soon as I confirmed the device's existence. They will be here within 48 hours. They will want the object. They will want Havel. And they will want this ship silenced. Silenced. Not destroyed. Silenced. The word choice told me everything I needed to know about Peter's handlers. Where is the device now? Peter shook IM's head. I do not know. The last time I saw it, it was in the survey chamber. Then it was gone. My logs show nothing. My scanners show nothing. It is not on the ship, or if it is not registering on any frequency I can read. You were supposed to be watching it. I was supposed to be watching it, Peter agreed. And I failed. The silence stretched. I made a decision. You are confined to the med bay, I said. You stay here with Havel. You do not leave. You do not access the terminal. If you try to send another transmission, I will cut the power to this section and you can sit in the dark until we figure out what to do. Yeva. Do not. I turned to the hatch. My hands were shaking now. I did not want Peter to see. Oki, with me. We left. I locked the hatch behind us. Manual override, mechanical lock. The kind that cannot be opened from inside. The corridor was empty. The ship was quiet. Oki stood beside me, her hand pressed flat against the bulkhead, her eyes closed. Bossman, she said, what do we do? I did not have an answer. I went to my cabin and sat in the dark and wrote. Kopis Edda, ship's log, Yeva Dreschler-Bo commanding. PETA is OPA intelligence. Has been from the beginning. And was placed on my ship 8 months ago to monitor KV 1191. The device is part of something larger, something that connects to Eros, to the thing that made a station move. PETA's handlers are coming. They consider us tolerable loss. Havel is still in the med bay, not dead, not alive, with PETA locked in beside him because I have nowhere else to put either of them. Baratna, who lied, is still Baratna, but Waloda have to figure out who Waloda are now. I sat in the dark for a long time. The ship hummed around me. Somewhere in the med bay, PETA was sitting beside Havel, holding the hand of a man Im had helped lead into a nightmare. And somewhere in the black between stars, a ship was coming for us. I thought about the people I had lost. My mother, in that hospice on Ceres, breathing through a tube. Jesper Konechny, the previous captain, alone in his cabin for 3 days before anyone noticed. Havel, who was still breathing but was no longer Havel in any way that mattered. And now PETA, not lost yet, but changed, the trust between us shattered in a way I did not know how to repair. This is what command costs you. Every decision you make takes something from you. The question is whether what you get in return is worth the price. I did not know the answer to that question. I am not sure I know it now. At 0400, I went to check on Kitano. He was in the pilot's seat, not sleeping, staring at the navigation display. The course to nowhere. He had not plotted a destination because we had nowhere to go that was safe. "Bossman," he said when I entered. He did not look at me. "You should sleep." So should you. I sat in the co-pilot's seat. The stars were visible through the forward viewport. Not many of them, out here in the deep belt, but enough to remind you of how small you are. I have spent my whole life in this emptiness. I have never gotten used to it. "PETA," Kitano said. "You know?" Oki told me. "She should not have." "She should have. We are past secrets, Bossman." He was right. I did not say it. "The rock," I said. "Pelka, you called it that when we arrived." "Yes." "Did you feel something? Before we found the tunnels?" Kitano was quiet for a long time. His hands rested on the armrests of the pilot's seat, palms up, open, a posture of receptivity. I had seen him sit like this during his prayers. "I felt something," he said finally. "I did not know what it was. I thought it was my imagination. I thought I was projecting. The Mon's teachings say that every rock has a voice, but they also say the voice is slow, too slow for human ears to hear. A rock song takes thousands of years to sing one note. I thought what I was feeling was just my own hope to hear something. But it was not. No." He turned to look at me. His eyes were dark, exhausted. "It heard us before we heard it. That is what I have been trying to understand. The rock was waiting. It knew we were coming. It has been listening since the first moment we entered its gravity well. And when Havel touched the device, not it, the rock recognized him." "Recognized him how?" "As kin." Kitano's voice dropped. "That is what the Mon's texts describe. The void consciousness. The thing between the rocks. It is not empty space, Bossman. It is full of something that has been waiting for a very long time. And Havel hears it now. He is not crazy. He is not dying. He is listening to something that has been speaking since before humanity existed." The words settled into me like cold water. "Do you believe that?" "I have to," he said, "because if I do not, then Havel is just a sick old man, and I have to accept that I do not understand any of what is happening. And I would rather believe the universe is stranger than I can comprehend than believe I am too stupid to understand it." I reached over and put my hand on his shoulder. He did not pull away. "Get some sleep," I said. "You too, Bossman." I did not, but I tried. I went back to my cabin and lay on my bunk and stared at the ceiling. The ship hummed. The vents whispered. Somewhere in the med bay, PETA was sitting beside Havel, holding the hand of a man Im had helped lead into a nightmare. And somewhere in the black between stars, a ship was coming for us. Kopis Edda, ship's log. For hours until dawn cycle. I have locked my medic in the med bay. I have a broken crew and a transformed rock and a device that has erased itself from every record. And somewhere out there, The people who put PETA on my ship are coming to collect what they sent him to find. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The Sound in the Bones of the Ship. The device appeared on PETA's bunk at 0517. The log entry is precise because I checked it myself. The med bay was locked. The manual override was engaged. The door had not been opened since I closed it 8 hours earlier. The corridor outside was empty. I checked the camera feeds. No one had approached. No one had entered. And yet, when PETA woke at sunrise cycle and opened IMS eyes, the device was resting on the pillow beside IMS head. PETA did not call for me. Him waited until I came to check on him at 0600, as I had said I would. When I opened the hatch and stepped inside, PETA was sitting on the edge of the bunk, hands in IMS lap, looking at the object on the pillow. Him had not touched it. Him had not moved. It appeared, PETA said. I woke up and it was there. The device looked the same as it had in the chamber. Cylindrical, 40 centimeters long, dark surface that seemed to shift under the light, not reflecting but absorbing, pulling the light into itself and giving nothing back. It was not warm. It was not cold. It was the temperature of the room, exactly, as if it had been there long enough to settle. But it had not been there. I knew it had not been there. The logs knew it had not been there. How? I asked. I do not know. Did you bring it here? Before I locked you in? No. Did you call it? PETA looked at me. IMS' face was pale. I did not call it. But Yeva, I dreamed about it. All night. I dreamed about the chamber. About the tunnels. About Havel. Except in the dream, he was not lying in the bed across from me. He was standing in the chamber, and he was not alone. Who was with him? I do not know. There were shapes. Not people. Shapes. Like the negative space where a person should be, carved out of the air. They were surrounding him, and he was speaking to them in a language I did not recognize. And when I woke up, it was here. The lock log confirmed the door had not been opened. The camera feed confirmed the corridor was empty. There was no explanation that did not involve something impossible. I told Oki first. She was in the engine room, running a diagnostic on the secondary coolant loop. She stopped what she was doing when I told her, and she stood very still for a long moment, and then she did not say anything. She walked past me and went to the med bay. She stood in the doorway and looked at the device on PETA's pillow. She did not enter. She stood there for maybe 2 minutes, her hand pressed against the frame, her eyes fixed on the object. Then she turned and walked to the galley and sat down at the table. I followed her. I need to do a structural survey, she said. Full hull. Every compartment. Why? Because I need to know how far it has spread. She would not say more than that. She went to get her tools. The structural survey took 6 hours. Oki went through every compartment of the Kopis Edda, the cargo bay, the engineering section, the crew quarters, the galley, the bridge, the airlock, the storage lockers, the crawl spaces behind the paneling. She took readings with a handheld ultrasonic scanner. She marked locations on a schematic of the ship. I watched her work. I helped where I could, holding the light, recording the coordinates. The work was methodical. Oki's hands moved with the precision of someone who has done this 1,000 times. But I could see the tension in her shoulders. I could see the way she paused at certain readings, frowning, scanning again to confirm. When she was done, she laid the schematic on the galley table, and we looked at it together. 7 cracks, all in the inner hull, all sealed, not by anything we had done, but sealed nonetheless, as if they had healed themselves. And when Oki traced them with her finger, connecting them in order of discovery, they formed a pattern. The same pattern as the cross-section of the tunnel. The ship has been marked, Oki said, or mapped, or infected. I do not have the right word. But the cracks, they are not structural damage, Bossman. They are not stress fractures. They are growths. Like roots. Like the rock is learning the shape of the ship. How long have they been there? The first one appeared 4 days ago. I found it after we brought Havel back. I sealed it. I thought it was a fatigue crack. I logged it and moved on. She pressed her palm against the schematic, flat, as if she could feel through the paper. It was not a fatigue crack. It was the first root. The first root of what? I do not know, but look at the dates. She pointed at each crack in sequence. This one appeared the day we entered the chamber. This one, the day Havel touched the device. This one appeared while we were recovering Havel from the new chamber. And this one, she tapped the last mark, at the edge of the schematic near the med bay. This one appeared this morning, after the device moved. The device moved. The cracks appeared. The pattern was clear. It is extending itself, Oki said. The rock, the device, whatever is happening, it is mapping the ship the same way it mapped the tunnels. It is learning our structure, and I do not know what happens when it is finished learning. Kitano came in while we were staring at the schematic. He was holding his mesh bag of stones, the collection he had gathered from every asteroid he had ever visited. He looked at the schematic. He looked at the pattern of cracks, and then he did something that made my blood run cold. He began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, silent tears running down his face, his hands clutching the bag of stones against his chest. I know that pattern, he said. I drew it. In the chamber. When I went back alone. I did not remember drawing it, but I found it in my journal this morning. 8 pages. I do not remember writing them. You said you did not remember writing in your journal. I said I did not remember what I wrote. I did not remember writing it at all. But this morning, I found the journal open on my bunk. The pages were full, and the diagrams, they matched the crack pattern. Exactly. He pulled the journal from his pocket. A small notebook, battered, pages dog-eared and stained. He opened it to a page near the middle and laid it beside the schematic. The drawing was intricate, geometric. It showed a pattern of lines and nodes that looked like a neural map or a tunnel system. And at the center of the pattern, a shape that matched the cross-section of the chamber. Below the diagram, in Kitano's handwriting but not in Kitano's voice, were words. Asterisk, the network spans the belt. KV 1191 is not unique. There are hundreds of identical structures, seated throughout the asteroid belt, dormant until the signal arrives. The signal arrived when the first human ship entered the outer system. The network has been listening ever since, waiting for activation. The device on Eros was the primer. This is the ignition, asterisk. This is not my writing, Kitano said. I mean, it is my hand, but it is not my words. I do not know these words. I have never studied geology at this level. I do not know what half of these terms mean, but I wrote them. During the 2 hours I spent in the chamber, I wrote them, and I do not remember any of it. Oki took the journal carefully, as if it might burn her. She studied the diagram. She studied the schematic. She studied the words. Eros was the primer, she said. This is the ignition. What does that mean? It means, Kitano said, that something is waking up, and we are inside it. I left them in the galley. I went to check on Havel. He was still in the med bay, still on the bunk, still breathing, still not there. Peeta was sitting beside him, as him had been for hours. The device was still on Peeta's pillow, undisturbed. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching Havel's chest rise and fall. The monitors showed the same readings they had shown since we brought him back. Heart rate steady, respiration steady, brain activity unusual but stable. He was not dying. He was not living. He was somewhere between, suspended in a state that our medical science did not have a name for. Then his hand moved. Not a twitch, not a spasm, a deliberate, controlled movement. His right hand lifted from the bunk and began to trace shapes in the air. Peeta stood up. I stepped closer. Havel's eyes were open. They were focused, not on anything in the room, but on something only he could see. His hand moved in precise arcs, drawing lines in the empty air. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Give me something to write with, I said. Peeta grabbed a data slate from the desk. I handed it to Havel, guided his hand to the surface. He began to draw immediately, the stylus scratching across the screen. The image he produced was a map, not of a tunnel system, not of a ship, a star map, a section of the outer belt. I recognized the coordinates, the relative positions of known rocks and known stations. And at the center, marked with a symbol I had never seen, a location that was not on any chart I had ever studied. Havel drew for 3 minutes. When he finished, his hand dropped. His eyes closed. The monitors showed no change. I looked at the map. It showed a region of the outer belt beyond KV 1191, a cluster of rocks that, according to the map, were connected by lines that matched the geometry of Kitano's diagram, lines that looked like a network. The symbol at the center was a spiral, tight, precise, drawn with the kind of accuracy that Havel had never shown in his life. Havel could barely use a data slate on a good day. This was the work of a hand that knew exactly what it was doing. "What is that?" Peta asked. "I do not know." "Yeva, that is not Havel's handwriting. That is not Havel's knowledge. He has never been a cartographer. He cannot even plot a course through the nav computer without help." "I know. He is drawing things he should not know." "I know." I took the data slate and left. I did not go to the galley. I went to the bridge. The sensors showed a contact at extreme range. A ship, running dark, no transponder, no communication, no navigation lights. It was holding position approximately 40 kilometers out, just inside the rock's gravity well. It had not been there an hour ago. I watched it on the display. A mid-sized vessel, heavier than the Kopis Edda. Military profile, not a warship, but close. The kind of ship that carried people who were used to getting what they wanted. The kind of ship that did not announce itself because it did not need to. The Coral's End. I did not know the name then. I would learn it soon enough. It did not hail us. It did not broadcast any ID. It sat in the darkness and watched. I studied its outline on the display. The hull configuration was unfamiliar, a design I had not seen before, which was unusual. In the belt, you learn to recognize ship types the way farmers learn to recognize animal breeds. This one was wrong. Not in any obvious way, but the proportions were off. The mass distribution suggested weapon mounts that were not visible. The drive signature was cleaner than anything Belter built. This was not an OPA ship. This was not a civilian ship. This was something that had been built by people with resources we could not imagine, sent to collect something they considered more valuable than our lives. I reached for the comm panel. My hand stopped before I could key the frequency. What would I say? What would I offer? I had a crew member who was not dead and not alive. I had a device that appeared and disappeared at will. I had a ship that was growing cracks in the shape of alien tunnels. And I had a contact on the edge of my sensor range that was either rescue or execution, and I had no way to tell which. I lowered my hand. The ship waited. The rock waited. And somewhere in the med bay, Havel was drawing maps of a network that should not exist, using knowledge that could not be his. I looked at the data slate in my hands. The map Havel had drawn was precise, elegant, nothing like the man who had drawn it. The lines were straight. The coordinates were accurate. The symbol at the center, the spiral, was drawn with the kind of care that suggested meaning, intention. I did not know what it meant, but I knew it was important. Important enough that Havel, or whatever was using Havel, had pulled it from the rock's memory and put it onto the slate. I went back to the galley. Kitano was still there, staring at his journal. Oki was still there, staring at the schematic. Neither of them had moved. "He drew a map," I said. They looked up. I took him the data slate. He drew a map of the outer belt, a section I have never seen charted, with a symbol at the center that I do not recognize. I showed them the slate. Kitano studied it. His face went pale. "This is accurate," he said. I do not know this region, but the spacing is right. The relative positions match known gravitational models. This is not a hallucination. This is a real map." How does Havel know this? He does not, but the rock does. The three of us stood in the galley, looking at the map that Havel had drawn, the cracks in the hull, the device that had appeared in a sealed room, the journal entries that Kitano did not remember writing, the ship on the sensors, waiting in the dark. The pattern was there. I could almost see it, the connections, the relationships, the geometry that linked everything together. The rock, the device, the ship, Havel, Kitano's journal, the unknown ship on the sensors. They were all part of the same structure, the same network, the same thing that was waking up around us. I just did not know what the structure was. I did not know what the network wanted. And I did not know whether the ship on the sensors had come to help us or to silence us. But I knew one thing. We were not alone out here. We had not been alone since the moment we arrived. Kopis Edda, ship's log. Contact acquired at extreme range. Unknown vessel. No ID. No communication. Holding position at 40 clicks. Havel has produced a map of the outer belt showing a connected network of rocks. The cracks in the hull formed the same pattern as the tunnels. The device appeared in a sealed room. Kitano wrote 8 pages he does not remember. I do not know what we have found. I do not know what has found us. But I know one thing with certainty. We are not alone out here. We have not been alone since the moment we arrived. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. La Guerra comes for everyone. The Quarrel's end held position for 6 hours before it hailed us. 6 hours of silence. 6 hours of watching that dark shape on the sensor display, waiting for it to move, to speak, to do anything. The crew gathered in the galley. We did not talk much. There was nothing left to say that had not already been said. The news feeds played in the background, low volume, a constant murmur of disaster. The inner planets were at war. Not rumors anymore. Not speculation. The UN and the MCR had exchanged fire in the belt. Officially, it was a dispute over transit rights in the Jupiter exclusion zone. Nobody believed that. The OPA channels were full of fragmentary reports. A UN task force had been sighted near Ceres. Martian Marines had boarded a Belter freighter on suspicion of smuggling weapons. 2 OPA cells had declared open support for Mars. 3 others had declared for Earth. The belt was fracturing along lines that had been forming for decades, and the people who did the fracturing were not Belters. I watched the feeds with half my attention. A talking head from Earth was explaining that the belt had always been a strategic liability. A Martian commentator was calling for a decisive response to OPA aggression. Neither of them mentioned the people who would die. Neither of them mentioned the ships that would be caught in the crossfire. Neither of them mentioned the Kopis Edda, sitting on the edge of nowhere with a device that belonged to something older than humanity. When the hail finally came, I was in my cabin. The bridge terminal chimed, a priority signal, tight beam, encrypted. I went to the bridge. The others followed. The face on the screen was Belter. That surprised me. I had expected an Inyalota face, some corporate enforcer with clean teeth and a uniform that cost more than my ship. Instead, I saw a woman who looked like she had been carved from the same rock as the rest of us. Thin, hollow-cheeked, with the kind of hard-won stillness that comes from a lifetime of learning not to show fear. Captain Dreschler-Bo, she said. Not a question. That is me. I am Commander Voss. I represent the organization that placed Agent Ngozi aboard your vessel. Agent. The word landed like a slap. I felt the crew shift behind me. I know who you represent, I said. I also know you placed a spy on my ship without my knowledge or consent. Necessary precautions. The nature of the operation required deniability. Deniability. I let the word sit. You sent my crew into a rock that is actively transforming itself. You did not warn us. You did not prepare us. You used us as bait. We did what was required. Say that to Havel. Voss did not flinch. Her eyes were flat, professional. She had delivered this kind of news before. She would deliver it again. Your crew member's condition is regrettable, but the mission parameters were clear. The device takes precedence over individual safety. You were compensated accordingly. I wanted to reach through the screen and wrap my hands around her throat. I have never felt that kind of violence before. I felt it then. What do you want? 3 things. She held up her fingers. The device, the crew member Havel, and your cooperation in debriefing. In exchange, your crew will be transported to a secure location. Your ship will be destroyed, compensated for, at fair market value. And you will be given new identities, new placements, a clean start. And if I refuse? You will not refuse. Try me. Voss looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, Captain, I do not think you understand the situation you are in. Your rock has been flagged as a priority asset by interests far above my pay grade. There are people on Ceres and Tycho and Luna who are watching this operation. If you do not cooperate with me, the next ship that arrives will not bother with negotiation. They will board your vessel, take what they want, and leave your crew to decorate the bulkheads. I am the reasonable option. I looked at her. I believed her. That was the worst part. Give me time, I said. You have 2 hours. 6. 4. At which point I will be forced to assume non-cooperation and act accordingly. She cut the connection. The screen went dark. The 4 of us stood in the bridge. Me, Oki, Kitano, and Pita. I had unlocked the med bay when the hail came. I needed every mind we had, even the one that had betrayed us. 3 options, I said. 1. We comply. We give them the device and Havel. We let them destroy the ship. We take the new identities and disappear. We live. At the cost of Havel, Oki said. At the cost of Havel. Option 2. We run. The Kopis Edda can outrun a military vessel if we push the drive past its limits. We burn hard for the inner system, lose ourselves in the traffic around Ceres, vanish. They will find us, Kitano said. They have resources. We have a broke water hauler with a patched hull and a drive that sounds like a dying man. Option 3. We fight. The silence was total. Fight, Oki said. Against a military vessel. With what? We have no weapons. We have no armor. We have a cargo bay full of survey equipment and a med bay full of medical supplies. We have the rock. They looked at me. The rock responds to us, I said. Kitano felt it. Oki saw the cracks. Havel drew the map. The device appeared in a locked room. The rock is not passive. It is active, and it has chosen us, or at least, it has not killed us yet. That is leverage. Leverage for what? Pita asked. For negotiation. For time. For something. I do not know yet. But the quarrels in wants the device and Havel. What happens if we make it clear that taking them will cost more than they are willing to pay? Kitano was the first to understand. I saw it in his face. The shift from confusion to comprehension, the slow dawn of a terrible idea. Havel is part of the rock now, he said. If they take him, they take the rock's attention. The device is the same. They do not understand what they are dealing with. They think it is a piece of technology, something to be studied, controlled, weaponized. They do not understand that it is alive, or connected, or listening. Exactly. You want to use the rock as a weapon, Oki said. Her voice was flat. You want to let it what? Defend us. I want the quarrels in to be afraid. Right now, they are not afraid. They think we are a crew of desperate belters with no options. They are right, but they do not know what we know. They have not been inside the tunnels. They have not seen the chamber. They have not watched Havel draw maps of places he has never been. That ignorance is the only advantage we have. Pita spoke for the first time. My handlers will not be deterred by fear. They are trained to operate in hostile environments. They have contingency plans for contingency plans. Then we make them use those plans. We make them work for it. And while they are working, we find a way out. The room was quiet. The ship hummed. Somewhere on the far side of the hull, the rock was listening. I want to adjust the plan, Kitano said. We looked at him. Havel will not leave the rock, he said. I have been thinking about it since we brought him back. The way he breathes, the way his eyes move, the patterns he draws. He is not a prisoner in there. He is communicating, translating. He is the rock's voice in a body that can still speak to us. He is our crewmate, Oki said. We are not leaving him. You are not hearing me. Kitano's voice was soft but urgent. He does not want to leave. The rock does not want him to leave. And if we try to take him, if we force the separation, I do not know what happens. But I do not think it will be good for us. You are saying we should leave him. I am saying we should ask him what he wants. He cannot answer. You have seen him. He is barely responsive. He answered when he drew the map. He answered when he spoke about Eros. He is still in there. We just have to know how to listen. I looked at Kitano. He was younger than me by 2 decades. He believed in things I did not. The consciousness of rocks, the voice of the void, the possibility that the universe was stranger than I could imagine. I had always thought of his faith as a harmless eccentricity, a way of making the emptiness more bearable. I was not sure anymore that it was a metaphor. Peta, I said, what do your handlers know about the rock's active properties? Peta hesitated. Limited information. Their intelligence suggests the tunnel system is a natural formation with anomalous characteristics. They do not know about the device's mobility. They do not know about Havel's transformation. They do not know about the cracks in the hull. So we have information they do not. Yes. And if we tell them, try to explain, will they believe us? No. They will dismiss it as crew trauma, sensor malfunction, stress-induced hallucination. They are analysts. They deal in data. Your subjective experience has no value to them. Then we do not tell them. We show them. I outlined the plan. It was not a good plan. It was the kind of plan you make when you have no good options. But it was a plan. We would let them board. We would lead them into the rock. We would show them the chamber, the tunnels, the evidence that our words could not convey. And we would let the rock do the rest. Will not agree to this, Peta said. Havel, the rock, whatever it is now, you are assuming it will cooperate. You are assuming it understands that we are trying to survive. What if it does not care? What if its goals do not include our survival? That was the question I had been avoiding. I do not know, I said, but I know we cannot stay here, and I know we cannot surrender. So we go forward, into the rock, with the device, and we see what happens. The crew looked at me. Oki, whose hands were pressed flat against the table. Kitano, whose stones were spread before him like a divination. Peta, who had betrayed us and was now our only link to the people who wanted to destroy us. We were 4 people on a dying ship, orbiting a waking rock, with a war closing in from every direction. We had nothing but each other and a plan that depended on the cooperation of a consciousness we did not understand. It was not enough. It would have to be enough. After the meeting broke up, I walked through the ship, not to check anything, to feel the ship under my hands, to remind myself of what we were fighting for. The Kopis Edda was not a beautiful ship. She was old and patched and tired, but she was ours. She had carried us through years of empty contracts and near misses. She had brought us to the rock, and she would carry us away from it. I found Oki in the engine room, running her hand along the drive housing. She did not hear me approach. She was listening to the hum of the reactor, feeling the vibration through her fingertips, the way she always did. Oki. She turned. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. Boss Mang. Are you all right? No. She laughed, a short, hollow sound. I am not all right. I am scared. I am exhausted. I am running on caffeine and spite. But I am still here. That is all I ask. I know. She pressed her hand against the drive housing again. The ship is ready. I pushed the drive past its safety margins. We have maximum thrust available. If we need to run, we can run. And if we need to stay? Then we stay. She looked at me. I trust you, Boss Mang. I do not trust the plan, but I trust you. That was more than I deserved. I did not say it. I walked to the bridge. Kitano was in the pilot's seat, His bag of stones spread across the console. He was not looking at the navigation display. He was looking at the stones. "Are you praying?" I asked. "I am listening." He picked up a small dark stone, smooth, shot through with veins of nickel iron. "This one is from the rock near Palace. I picked it up 3 years ago. It has a specific frequency, a specific voice. Every rock has one. I have been learning to hear them." "And what does this one say?" He turned the stone over in his fingers. "It says we are not the first. The rocks have been listening to living things for billions of years. We are just the latest. We are not special. We are just here." "And that does not frighten you?" "It should, but somehow it does not." He looked up at me. "If we are not special, then we are not alone. And that, to me, is comforting." I did not know how to respond to that, so I left him with his stones and went to check on Peta. The med bay was dark. Peta was sitting beside Havel's bunk, holding his hand. The monitors beeped their slow rhythm. The device, no, Kitano had taken the device, was no longer in the room. Just Havel, still breathing, still not there. "I'm as stable," Peta said without looking up. "Vitals unchanged. No improvement. No decline." "That is not what I came to ask." Peta was silent for a long moment. Then him set Havel's hand down gently and turned to face me. "I am ready to do whatever is needed," Im said. "I know you do not trust me. I know I have not earned the right to be part of this crew. But I am here, and I will do whatever you ask." "I am not asking you to do anything. I am asking if you are all right." Peta stared at me. For a long moment, Im did not speak. "No," Im said finally. "I am not all right. I have spent 8 months lying to people I have come to care about. I have compromised everything I believed about myself. I do not know who I am anymore." "Welcome to the club." Peta laughed. It was not a happy laugh, but it was real. "What happens after this?" Im asked. "Assuming we survive." "I do not know. We find work. We stay quiet. We try to forget." "Do you think we will forget?" I looked at Havel, at his still face, his steady breathing, the faint iridescence that still clung to his skin. "No," I said. "I do not think we will forget." I left Peta in the med bay and went to my cabin. I had 4 hours until the deadline. I spent them writing. Kopis Edda, ship's log. 4 hours until the deadline. I have made my choice. We are going back into the rock. We are taking the device. We are taking Havel. And we are going to show Commander Voss exactly what she is dealing with. Sometimes the only way out is through. Sometimes the only way through is down. Here we go. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. Into the Throat. We entered the rock at 0947. I remember the time because Oki made a note of it. She was recording everything now, every reading, every measurement, every scrap of data that might help us understand what we were dealing with. She had strapped a portable sensor array to her chest and was running it continuously, the display flickering with numbers that she claimed were meaningful but that I could not interpret. The tunnel entrance looked different. That was the first thing I noticed. The bore we had drilled on survey day 3 had been clean, fresh cut, the walls still showing the spiral marks of the drill head. Now the edges were smooth, rounded, as if they had been worn down by centuries of use rather than 3 days of exposure. "The rock healed itself," Oki said. She ran her hand along the tunnel wall. "The drill marks are gone. The surface is the same material as the chamber walls." "How is that possible?" "I do not know, but the composition is identical. The rock is standardizing, converting the damaged area into the same structure as the original tunnel system." Kitano was already moving ahead, his hand light cutting a path through the darkness. He was carrying the device. We had argued about that. Peta wanted to secure it in a containment case. Oki wanted to leave it on the ship. In the end, I decided that Kitano would carry it because he was the only one of US who did not seem afraid of it. He held it against his chest, cradled like something precious, and walked with a certainty that I had not seen in him before. She knows where she is going, he said when I asked how he knew which turn to take. She. The rock. Helka. The chamber. He touched the device. All of it. They are connected. Like a nervous system. When I hold the device, I can feel the pathways. The tunnels are showing me the way. I did not ask him to elaborate. I did not want to know what it felt like to hold something that should not exist. Havel walked behind Kitano. He was moving on his own now. That was the word Oki used. Moving, not walking. His gait was different, smoother, more deliberate. He did not stumble. He did not pause. He placed each foot with precision, as if he had been walking these tunnels his entire life. Pito walked beside Havel, monitoring his vitals on a handheld scanner. Him had not spoken since we entered the rock. I brought up the rear, my hand on my tool. The tunnels had changed. I noticed it first in the geometry. The original tunnel system had been cylindrical, regular, uniform. Now the surface had developed a texture that I could not quite describe. Not rough, not smooth. Something between. Something that seemed to shift when I looked at it directly, as if the rock was breathing. I stopped and pressed my palm against the wall. It was warm, warmer than it should have been. Body temperature. Oki came back and pressed her hand against the wall. Her eyes widened. That was not here before. The rock is adjusting to us. We walked deeper. The new chambers that had grown since our first entry were not empty. They contained pillar-like structures covered in patterns that looked like writing, but were not writing. Alcoves carved into the walls at regular intervals, each one containing a small depression that seemed designed to hold something. Kitano called them furniture. I did not want to think about what the occupants might look like. The device in Kitano's hands began to change as we moved deeper. It was warmer now. I could feel the heat from where I stood. It began to vibrate. A low hum, a frequency that I could feel in my teeth. Oki, your instruments. She checked. Nothing. The device is not registering any change. But I can feel it. We all can, Kitano said without turning. That is the point. It is not a frequency that machines can read. He stopped walking. He turned to face us, the device held against his chest. The vibration was visible now, a shimmer in the air around it. She is happy, Kitano said. We are bringing her home. Nobody told him not to use that word. We moved deeper. The tunnel branched, then branched again. The walls were smooth, polished, with a dark sheen that caught the light and threw it back in strange refractions. The patterns on the walls were interlocking geometries that I could almost understand. Havel, walking ahead of me, placed his hand on a section of wall. The patterns beneath his palm brightened. The vibration shifted in pitch. He knows where we are, Oki whispered. He has never been in here, but he knows it. I watched him move. He never hesitated. Every turn was correct. The corridor opened into a chamber that was not on any of our survey scans. It was vast, 30 meters across, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness. The walls were covered in patterns so dense that they looked like a solid surface. In the center, a structure rose from the floor. A table, too regular to be natural. On its surface, arranged in a precise grid, were small stones. Kitano approached the table. He looked at the stones. He looked at his own mesh bag, the collection he had carried for years. They match, he said. My collection. The same number. The same arrangement. Coincidence? No. He touched one of the stones. The rock knew what I carried. She made copies. I did not have words for what I was seeing. The rock had somehow known what Kitano carried, had duplicated it, had arranged it on a table in a chamber that had not existed 3 days ago. Pita stepped forward and examined the table. Im ran a scanner over the stones, frowning at the readings. The composition is identical, Im said, down to the trace elements. If I did not know better, I would say these are the same stones. They are not the same stones, Kitano said. Mine are in my bag. These are copies. Impressions. The rock read my memory of them and recreated them. The rock read your memory. Yes, The same way it reads Havel's thoughts. The same way it learned the shape of our ship. It is a learning system. It observes. It replicates. It adapts. I looked at the stone table, at the perfect duplicates arranged in their precise grid. The rock had looked inside Kitano's mind and found his collection of stones. It had recreated them, molecule for molecule, in a chamber that had not existed 3 days ago. What else had it found inside his mind? What else had it copied? "We need to keep moving," I said. Kitano picked up his bag. He left the duplicates on the table. He did not look back. The tunnel walls continued to change as we moved deeper. The patterns we had seen in the outer sections were more pronounced here. Deeper grooves, tighter geometries, a complexity that suggested language even though it was not language. Oki stopped several times to run her scanner over the walls, recording everything, muttering to herself about thermal conductivity and crystalline structure and things I did not understand. "It is not rock," she said at one point. "I mean, it is rock. But it is organized rock. The molecular structure has been rearranged. The carbon atoms are arranged in a lattice that should not occur naturally. It is grown. Like bone. Like bone. Bone is living tissue. It grows. It repairs itself. It responds to stress. That is what this rock is doing. It is responding to us." I pressed my hand against the wall. The warmth was still there, steady, patient. The rock was aware of us. It was responding to our presence the way skin responds to touch. "Keep moving," I said. The tunnel branched ahead. Kitano did not hesitate. He took the left passage without checking his instruments, without consulting the map, without any of the precautions that a trained navigator would take. He simply walked, and we followed. Havel walked beside him, matched step for step. The two of them moved in sync, their footsteps falling together, their breathing synchronizing. They were both connected to the rock now, both part of the network, and they moved through the tunnels with the certainty of people who already knew where they were going. I thought about what Kitano had said. She is happy. We are bringing her home. Home. The word did not fit. A rock was not a home. A rock was a lump of minerals and ice, drifting through the void, waiting to be mined or surveyed or ignored. But Kitano did not use the word lightly. If he said the rock was happy, he meant that the rock had a state, an emotion, a consciousness. And we were inside it. The vibration grew stronger with every step. I could feel it in my chest now, a steady thrum that matched the rhythm of my heart. The chamber, when we reached it, was not the chamber we had left. It was larger. The walls had pushed outward, expanding the space by at least a meter in every direction. The domed ceiling was higher, curving up into shadows that our lights could not penetrate. The walls were covered in patterns so dense they seemed to breathe, pulsing with a soft luminescence that shifted between colors, not the spectrum we knew, but something else, colors that did not have names. The air was different here, thicker, charged. It tasted like metal and ozone and something older, something that had been sealed in the rock for longer than humanity had existed. The pedestal was in the center of the chamber, exactly where we had found it on our first visit. But it had changed. It was taller now, more ornate, the surface covered in the same interlocking patterns as the walls. The depression at the top, where the device had rested, glowed faintly. Kitano approached slowly, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He held the device out in front of him, both hands supporting it, as if making an offering at an altar. "I am supposed to put it back," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "That is what she wants." "Do it," I said. He placed the device on the pedestal. The vibration that followed was not a sound. It was a frequency that I felt in my chest rather than heard with my ears. The walls, the whole chamber, began to hum. The patterns brightened, pulsed, faded. The floor beneath my feet shifted. The device settled into the pedestal like a body relaxing into a familiar position. A homecoming. Kitano stepped back. "The chamber is closing," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. "What do you mean?" "The walls. The entrance. She is sealing herself." I looked at the entrance behind us. The edges of the tunnel were shimmering, the rock moving in a slow, deliberate flow. Oki ran to it and pressed her scanner against the wall. He is right. The tunnel cross-section is decreasing. We have maybe 20 minutes. Then we go. But Oki was still staring at her scanner. Her face had gone pale. There is a problem. The seal will not complete unless someone stays behind. The walls respond to proximity, to living presence. Without a body at the threshold, the closure will be incomplete. The coral's end could force entry, Kitano said. If the seal is incomplete, they can take everything. How long does someone need to stay? The entire time, until the seal is complete. The geometry suggests hours, maybe more. I looked at the crew. Oki, frozen at the entrance. Kitano, pale but calm. Pita, silent and watchful. And Havel. He was standing at the edge of the chamber, his hand pressed to the wall, his head tilted, listening. Havel, I said, we need to go. He did not answer. I said it again, louder this time. Havel. He turned. Slowly. His eyes found mine. And I understood. I understood in that look what I had been refusing to understand since the moment we entered the rock. The calm on his face. The certainty in his posture. The way he had walked through the tunnels without hesitation, never taking a wrong turn. The way his hand had gone to the wall as if drawn there by something stronger than gravity. He had known. Before we entered the tunnels. Before we discussed the plan. He had known that this was the end of a line for him. Havel, I said again, but my voice was different now. Smaller. Boss Mang. He said it gently. The way you say a name when you are about to say goodbye. No. You have not even heard what I am going to say. I know what you are going to say, and the answer is no. He smiled. That crooked, knowing smile. You cannot say no to something that has already happened. It has not happened yet. It has. I have been part of her since the moment I touched the device. Every hour since then has been borrowed time. And now I have to pay it back. 20 minutes, I said. We have 20 minutes to figure this out. The walls pulsed. The vibration hummed. The rock waited. I looked at the crew. Oki was pressed against the tunnel entrance, her scanner still reading the closure rate. Her hands were shaking. I could see her running calculations in her head, trying to find a solution that did not exist. Kitano stood with his hand resting on the device. He had not let go since placing it on the pedestal. The patterns from the wall reflected in his eyes, shifting, pulsing. He was listening to something the rest of us could not hear. Pita stood apart from the group. IMS arms were crossed. IMS face was unreadable, but I saw IMS hands, and was twisting them together, a nervous gesture I had never seen him make before. Im was afraid. We all were. And Havel. He was still at the edge of the chamber, his palm flat against the wall, his eyes closed. His breathing was slow and steady. He looked more peaceful than I had seen him since before the rock. No one spoke. The vibration filled the space between us. We have 20 minutes, I said. We are going to use them. We are going to figure this out. Together. The way we have always done. Boss Mang, Oki said, what if there is no way out that does not leave someone behind? The question hung in the air. I wanted to tell her there was always a way, that I would find it, that I had never let my crew down before, and I was not going to start now. But I could not, because I did not have an answer. Then we figure out who it is, I said finally, and we make sure they are not alone when the walls close. I looked at Havel again. He had not opened his eyes, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch, the ghost of a smile. He already knew. He had always known. I looked at Havel. He had not opened his eyes, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch, the ghost of a smile. He knew. He had known since we entered the chamber. And I knew too. I just did not want to admit it. Kopis Edda, ship's log. The device has been returned. The chamber is closing, and one of us will need to stay behind to seal it. We have 20 minutes to decide who. But I think the decision has already been made. I think it was made the moment Havel touched the device, days ago, in a chamber that should not have existed. I think it was made before we even arrived at this rock. The question is not who stays. The question is whether we have the strength to let them go. End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12, Havel's Choice. The chamber was closing. I could feel it in the deck beneath my feet, in the air pressing against my skin. The walls were moving, not fast, but steadily, the rock flowing like thick liquid, reshaping itself around the device that had returned to its resting place. 20 minutes, maybe less. We need to decide, I said. Who stays? Nobody spoke. The vibration filled the silence. I looked at each of them. Oki, with her hands pressed flat against the wall, feeling the rock's movement through her fingertips. Kitano, still standing at the pedestal, his hand resting on the device. Peta, standing apart, IMS face unreadable. And Havel, still at the edge of the chamber, still connected to the wall. I will stay, I said. No. Oki's voice was sharp. You are the captain. The crew needs you. Then one of you. I will stay. Kitano's voice was quiet. Certain. I understand her. The rock. Helka. She speaks to me. I can be the threshold. No. This time it was Peta. You are the only one who can navigate. Without you, the crew cannot survive in these tunnels. I will stay. You have already sacrificed enough, Kitano said. You gave up your mission for us. My mission was a lie. I was using you. Staying is the least I can do. Quiet, I said. All of you. We are not deciding this like we are choosing who gets the last ration pack. I turned to Havel. Havel, you have been silent. What do you say? He took his hand off the wall. Slowly, deliberately, he turned to face us. The patterns on the wall cast shifting light across his face, and for a moment, he looked like a man standing in sunlight. You are all wrong, he said. About what? About who stays. He walked toward us. His gait was smooth, but his eyes were Havel's eyes. I was sure of it. The chamber will not accept any of you, he said. It is not about proximity. It is about resonance. The rock knows me. I am part of her network now. If I stay, the seal will hold. If one of you stays, the rock will not recognize you. The closure will be incomplete, and the quarrels will find a way in. That is not certain, Oki said. We do not know how the rock determines. It is certain. Havel's voice was gentle but absolute. I know because she told me. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. You cannot know that, I said. You cannot. Yeva. He stepped closer. I have been inside her mind for 3 days. I have seen the network. I have felt the signal that runs through the rocks of the outer belt. I know what she wants, and she wants me to stay. She wants you to die. No. He shook his head. She does not understand death the way we do. To her, it is a transition, a change of state, like water to ice, like rock to dust. She does not fear it, and neither do I. You are not thinking clearly. The proto-molecule is not here. He put his hand on my shoulder. His grip was strong, warm. The proto-molecule is on Eros, on Venus, doing what it does, transforming, consuming, building. But this is different. This rock is not infected. She is awakened. She was always alive. The proto-molecule just woke her up. And you are choosing to stay with her. I am choosing to go where I belong. He smiled. I have spent 61 years fixing things. Ships, systems, people. I have never been fixed myself. This rock, she is the first thing that has ever made me feel whole. I wanted to argue. I wanted to grab him and drag him out of the chamber. But I could not move. His certainty was absolute. It filled the room like the vibration, like the light from the patterns, like the steady pulse of the rock around us. You cannot do this, I said. We need you. You do not need me. You need each other. You need Oki's hands and Kitano's faith and Peta's honesty, now that him has nothing left to hide. And you need your own stubbornness, Yeva, your refusal to let the universe break you. He turned to Oki. Baratna. He took her hands. The sound in the deck plates. The one you have been hearing your whole life. You know what it is now. The network, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes, and you can hear it too. You always could. You just did not have a name for it. When you put your hand on the ship and you feel it hum, that is the same song. The same frequency. The rocks have been singing since the beginning. We just were not listening. I do not want to listen without you. You will not have to. He pressed her hand against his chest. I will be part of the song now. Every time you put your hand on the deck, you will feel me. Every time the ship hums, you will hear my voice. I will not be gone, Oki. I will be louder. She tried to smile. It came out wrong. That is a terrible joke. It is the only kind I have. Promise me something. Anything. When you are part of the network, when you can hear the song of all the rocks, promise me you will listen for us. Promise me you will watch for us. I promise. And if there is danger, if the network wakes up all the way, if the rocks start moving, promise me you will warn us. Somehow. Havel was quiet for a long moment. The patterns on the walls pulsed. The vibration hummed. I will try, he said. I cannot promise I will succeed. The network does not work the way we think. It is slower, larger. A message from me might take years to reach you, or it might never arrive. But I will try. That is all I ask. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, saying goodbye without words. Havel turned to Kitano. Coping. He reached out and touched the mesh bag of stones that Kitano still carried. Your stones. The names you gave them. She heard every one. She did. The rocks have been listening to you longer than you have been listening to them. You were right, Kitano. Everything you believed. The Mon's teachings. The void consciousness. The rocks as sleeping minds. You were right. Kitano's face crumpled. He had been holding himself together through the whole descent, through the tunnels and the patterns and the device. But this, Havel affirming his faith, the faith that had made him an outsider on every ship he had ever served, this broke something in him. I did not want to be right, he said. I wanted it to be a metaphor. It is not a metaphor, but it is not what you thought either. Havel smiled. The void between bones is not empty, but it is not a god. It is not a consciousness the way we understand consciousness. It is older, slower, more patient. It does not think the way we think. It feels the way a mountain feels. It dreams the way a planet dreams. How do you know? Because she showed me. He touched his own chest. And because I am going to become part of it. Kitano reached out and took Havel's hand. The gesture was simple but profound. A young navigator holding the hand of an old mechanic, bridging the gap between them with touch. Will you remember us? Kitano asked. When you are part of it, will you remember who you were? I do not know. Havel's voice was gentle. The network does not have memory the way we do. It has impression, imprint. The mark we leave on it becomes part of its structure. I will carry you with me the way the rock carries the memory of every living thing that has ever touched it. Will you remember the stones? I will remember the stones. He reached into Kitano's mesh bag and pulled out a small dark stone. This one, from Palace. You named it after your grandmother. Kitano stared at him. I never told you that. You did not have to. The rock knew. The rock knows everything you have ever told those stones. Kitano began to cry. He did not try to hide it. Havel turned to Peta. Peta was standing at the edge of the group, arms crossed, IMS face hard. Im had been waiting for this. I could see it in IMS posture, the brace for impact. Me not angry, Havel said. Everyone carries something they are afraid to show. You carried your secret. I carry the rock now. We are all carrying something heavier than we were built for. Peter did not respond. You think you do not deserve forgiveness, Havel said. You think what you did, the lies, the transmissions, the mission, you think it makes you irredeemable. Yes. Well, you are wrong. He stepped closer. I have known you for 8 months. I have watched you treat every injury on this ship with care. I have watched you sit beside me when I was sick. I have watched you carry the weight of your secret without letting it turn you cruel. That is not the behavior of an irredeemable person. I was ordered to treat you. You were ordered to observe. You chose to care. That was your choice, not your orders. Peter's composure cracked, just slightly. IM's lip trembled. Im did not let the tears fall, but I saw them gathering. I am sorry, Im said. I know. Havel put his hand on IM's shoulder. And that is enough. Peter nodded. Im could not speak, but Im stepped forward and embraced Havel. A quick, fierce hug that surprised all of us. Havel held him for a moment, then let go. Take care of them, Havel said quietly. You have the skills. You have the heart. Use both. Peter nodded again. Im stepped back, IM's face wet. Finally, Havel turned to me. Here we go, Boss Mang. Havel. You are going to argue with me. Yes. And I am going to tell you that it will not change anything. And I am going to tell you that I do not care. He laughed. A real laugh, the kind I had heard 1,000 times in the galley. It was the most beautiful sound I had heard in days. You are the best captain I have ever served under, he said. And I have served under some real sabakas. You kept this ship together when anyone else would have let it fall apart. You kept this crew together when anyone else would have let them scatter. You brought us here, to this moment, to this choice. And you are going to take them home. I cannot do this without you. You can. He took my face in his hands. His palms were rough, calloused, warm. The hands of a man who had spent his life fixing things. You are going to take the ship. You are going to run. You are going to survive. And you are going to write this down, everything we found, everything we learned, because it needs to be written somewhere. Because the rocks are alive and the void between bones is full of something that does not need us to survive, but does not mind us surviving either. That, to a belter, is about as much grace as you can ask for. We need a better plan. There is no better plan. Only this one. He let go of my face. Go fly, Yeva. Go fly and do not look back. The walls groaned. The vibrations spiked. The patterns flared. The chamber is closing faster, Oki said. We have maybe 10 minutes. That is your cue, Havel said. 10 minutes is not enough. It is enough to say goodbye. I looked at him. The light of the patterns played across his face. He was smiling. Not the transformed smile, the empty one. His real smile. The one I had seen 1,000 times. Setera, he said. I will be Setera, Yeva, among the stars, where I have always belonged. I pulled him into an embrace. I am not a person who embraces easily. I have spent too many years losing people to let myself get close. But I held him. I held the pampaw of my crew, the man who had kept my ship running for 12 years, the closest thing to family I had left. Setera, Havel. He held me for a moment. Then he let go. He walked to the threshold of the chamber. The walls were already closing, the opening narrowing. He stood in the gap, facing us, his back to the pulsing light of the chamber. Go, he said. I could not move. Oki grabbed my arm. Boss Mang. Peter took my other arm. Kitano stood in front of me, blocking my view of Havel, forcing me to look at him instead. We need to go, Kitano said. Now. I looked over his shoulder. Havel was still standing at the threshold. The walls were closing around him. The gap was shrinking. Go, Havel shouted. I turned. I ran. The tunnels were darker now, the walls pressing closer, the vibration building to a pitch that I could feel in my teeth. Kitano led. He knew the way because the rock showed him. I followed. I did not look back. We reached the entrance at 10:38. The ship was where we had left it. The airlock cycled. The lights were on. I did not stop. I went to the bridge. I fired the drive. The Kopis Edda lifted off the rock surface and burned for open space. Behind us, the tunnel entrance sealed. The rock was smooth again, unbroken, as if we had never been there. The chamber was closed. Havel was inside. I sat in the captain's chair and stared at the sensor display. The rock was a dark shape against the stars, receding as we burned away from it. "He is gone," Oki said. She was standing behind me, her hand on the back of my chair. "Yes." "He chose." "Yes." I do not know how to feel about that. I did not answer. I did not know how to feel either. Oki was the first to break the silence. I should have seen it. The cracks. The device. The way he changed. I should have understood what was happening. "You could not have known," Kitano said. "I am the engineer. The ship is my responsibility. The cracks, I found them. I sealed them. I should have asked more questions." "He chose this, Oki. He chose it before any of us understood what choice meant." "Does that make it better?" "No." Kitano's voice was gentle. "It does not make it better, but it makes it his, not ours to carry." Oki did not answer, but she pressed her palm against the bulkhead, the way she always did, listening. We sat in the silence of the bridge, watching the stars. The rock was gone from the sensors now. We were alone again, truly alone, the way ships are always alone in the vastness between rocks. Kopis Edda, ship's log. Havel Marksuksane, 61 years old, mechanic, storyteller, pampaw of this crew, has chosen to remain inside KV 1191. He sealed the chamber. He sealed it with himself inside. He told me he was not afraid. He told me he was going home. I do not know what home means to a rock that has been asleep for millions of years, but I know what it meant to Havel, and I know that he was smiling when I left him. Cetera Pampaw. Cetera. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. The Quarrel ends. We had been burning for 11 minutes when the quarrel's end appeared on our sensors. I saw it on the display before the alarm sounded, a blip at extreme range, resolving into a contact that had not been there 30 seconds earlier. The quarrel's end had been holding position 40 kilometers out, waiting, watching, and when we broke orbit, it moved. "Contact," Oki said from the engineering station. "She is burning hard. Intercept course." Time to intercept. At current velocities, 43 minutes. 43 minutes. That was not enough time to reach the debris field Kitano had identified as our only escape route. Not enough time to do anything except run and hope. Can we outrun her? Oki checked her displays. No. Her drive is military grade. She has at least 30% more thrust than we do. She will catch us before we reach the debris field. Then we do not go to the debris field. Where do we go? I looked at the display. KV 1191 was behind us, a dark shape against the stars. The quarrel's end was ahead and to port, cutting an intercept angle that would bring them alongside us in less than an hour. And beyond them, nothing. Empty space. The outer belt. The long dark between rocks where a ship could run forever and never find help. We go back, I said. Back where? To the rock. The silence on the bridge was absolute. Bossman, Kitano said slowly, the chamber is sealed. Havel is inside. There is nothing for us there. There is nowhere else to go. The quarrel's end will catch us in open space. They will board us. They will take what they want. And they will leave us to decorate the bulkheads. Our only chance is to make them follow us somewhere they do not want to go. The rock. The rock. I changed course. The Kopis Edda's drive groaned as I brought her around, the old hull protesting the maneuver. The display showed the quarrel's end adjusting, matching our turn. She is following, Oki said. Good. Let her follow. KV 1191 grew on the display as we approached. The rock looked the same as it had when we left it, dark, silent, unremarkable. A 4-kilometer carbonaceous chondrite with no distinguishing features. No sign of the tunnels. No sign of the chamber. No sign of hovel. But I knew what was inside, and I was counting on the quarrels in not knowing. Bring us into low orbit, I said. Match velocity with the surface. Low orbit. Oki's voice was sharp. Bossman, if we go into low orbit around that rock, we give them a choice. They can follow us into the rock's gravity well, or they can watch us from a distance. If they follow, they commit to a close approach. If they do not follow, they will follow, Kitano said. They want the device. They want hovel. They will not let us go. Then we make them work for it. The Kopis Edda settled into low orbit, the rock's surface scrolling beneath us at a few hundred meters altitude. The corals followed, matching our orbit, maintaining distance. Commander Voss's voice came over the comm, Captain Dreschler-Bo. You are not cooperating. I am cooperating with my survival. You have nowhere to go. Your drive is inferior. Your ship is unarmed. Return the device and the crew member hovel, and we will honor our original offer. The device is in the rock. Hovel is in the rock. You want them, you come get them. Silence. Then, you are bluffing. I am not. The chamber is sealed. The only way to access it is to go into the tunnels yourself. And I do not think you have the equipment for that. We have the equipment. Then come and get it. I cut the connection. He is not going to like that, Oki said. He is not supposed to like it. He is supposed to hesitate. The quarrels held position for 6 minutes. 6 minutes of silence. 6 minutes of watching the display, waiting for the decision that would determine whether we lived or died. Then the quarrels changed course. It did not follow us. It did not pursue. It turned toward the rock. What is she doing? Oki asked. I watched the display. The coral's end was descending toward KV 1191's surface, its drive flaring as it matched the rock's rotation. It was going to land. They are going in, Kitano said. They are going into the tunnels. Without us. They do not need us. Voss said they have equipment. They have people. They will find the chamber themselves. Will they? The question hung in the air. The sealed chamber. The shifting tunnels. The rock that had grown new passages in 3 days. The rock that had claimed hovel. I watched the corals settle onto the surface of KV 1191. Watched the sensor readings as its crew disembarked. Watched the thermal signatures as they entered the tunnel system. And I waited. We should run, Peter said quietly. While they are inside, we should burn hard and never look back. We will. But not yet. Not yet. We held orbit for 37 minutes. 37 minutes of watching the sensor readings from the rock's surface. The Coral's End's crew had penetrated deep into the tunnel system. Their thermal signatures showed them moving through the passages, following the same route we had taken, descending toward the sealed chamber. 11 signatures at first, then 10, then 9, spreading out through the branching tunnels like blood vessels in a body. And then the readings changed. The rock's vibration began to increase. Not the steady hum we had felt during our descent, something faster, more jagged. The seismic readings spiked in sequences that looked almost like a language, bursts of activity followed by long pauses, as if the rock were thinking between movements. She is reacting to them, Kitano said. She does not like them. They are not welcome the way we were. Not welcome how? She is closing around them. I watched the display. The thermal signatures were still moving, but slower now, the intervals between them stretching. The passages were shifting. I could see it on the subsurface imaging, walls flowing like slow water, chambers shrinking and expanding. The route the coral's end had taken into the rock was no longer the route they would take out, because no route existed anymore. Commander Voss's voice came over the comm. It was not the voice I had heard before. The flat, professional cadence was gone. In its place was something raw, something hoarse and rapid that she was trying very hard to control and failing. Captain Dreschler-Bo, the tunnels are, the walls are moving. Our mapping data is invalid. We have lost 2 crew members and a branch that sealed behind them. We can hear them. We can hear them through the rock. They are not. The transmission cut for a moment. When it resumed, there were other voices in the background, shouting, a sound I recognized as a suit alarm, the high shriek of a seal failing. Someone was screaming Voss's name. Captain, please. We need the navigator. We need your crew's mapping data. We need. A sound that was not a voice. A grinding, low and deep, the sound of rock closing against rock, of stone moving with purpose. The transmission crackled. The background voices grew louder, more desperate. There is something in the walls, Voss said. Her voice had changed again, no longer controlled, no longer straining. Empty. The voice of someone who had just understood something terrible. It is not just closing. It is, we can see it now. It has a shape. It has. The background noise cut. The transmission went clean. Voss's voice, alone, very quiet. What did you find down here, Captain? Commander. What did you wake up? Before I could answer, the seismic reading spiked. Not a pulse this time. A surge, enormous, a wave of energy that registered on every frequency at once and then collapsed inward. The comm channel dissolved into static. The thermal signatures on the display began to flicker, 1, 2, 3 at a time, winking out like embers dying in a cold wind. The remaining signatures clustered together, a knot of warmth in the dark, and then the knot shrank and disappeared. One last transmission pushed through the static. Voss's voice, but barely, a whisper, a breath, the sound of someone speaking into a failing radio with the last air they will ever have. The walls are warm. Then nothing. The seismic reading went flat. The thermal signatures were gone, all of them. The rock was still, silent, satisfied. The Coral's End's crew did not re-emerge. I watched the display for a long time. The rock was dark. The tunnels were sealed. 11 signatures had gone down into the passages, and 0 had come back. Oki was the first to speak. Her voice was barely above a whisper. No transmissions. No distress beacon. Not even a suit ping. The rock, Kitano said. The rock took them. She said the walls were warm, Peta said quietly. The last thing she said. The walls were warm. We sat with that. The idea of it. Descending through tunnels that were closing around you. Feeling the rock against your suit. And the last thing you notice before the dark takes you is that the stone is warm. Alive. Waiting. I thought about Commander Voss. About her flat, professional voice. About the way she had said I was the reasonable option. About the fear I had heard in her voice in that last transmission, when she realized the tunnels were closing around her team. She had come to take. She had come to silence. She had come believing she was in control. The rock had taught her otherwise. She took them, Kitano said. His voice was hollow. The rock took them, the same way she took Havel. Did she? I do not know. Maybe she consumed them. Maybe she translated them. Maybe they are part of the network now, the same way Havel is. I do not know, but they are not coming back. Peta stepped forward. IMS face was pale, but IMS voice was steady. There were 12 people on that ship. Crew, operatives, Commander Voss, 12 people who came here believing they were in control. And the rock just swallowed them. Like it swallowed Havel. No, Peta shook IMS head. Havel chose. Havel was invited. These people, they forced their way in. They came with tools and weapons and the assumption that they could take what they wanted. The rock responded differently to them. How do you know? Because Havel is still alive. Peter pointed at the display. I watched his biometrics. I know what the rock does to someone it accepts. Those thermal signatures, they did not fade the way Havel faded. They flickered. They struggled. They were resisted. I thought about Havel, about the smile on his face when I left him, about the certainty in his voice when he said he was going home. Was this what he had chosen? A network of consumed minds, connected through the rock, sharing a consciousness that operated on a scale I could not comprehend? Or was it something else? Something I could not understand because I was not part of it? I would never know. Boss Mang. Oki's voice was quiet. The coral's end. It is still on the surface. Fully intact. No damage. If we... No. We could salvage it. The parts alone. No. The word came out harder than I intended, but I meant it. The coral's end was a tomb now. Its crew was inside the rock, and the rock was not giving them back. I was not going to strip a tomb for parts. Set a course, I said. Away from here. Any heading that takes us away from this system. Where are we going? I do not know. Anywhere. Everywhere. Away. Kitano programmed the course. The Kopis Edda's drive fired. We pulled away from KV 1191, leaving the rock and the sealed chamber and the corals in behind. I watched the display as the rock shrank to a dot, then a point, then nothing. No transmissions, no pursuit, no sign that the coral's end had ever existed. The crew of the Kopis Edda sat in silence as the stars stretched out around us. We had escaped. We had survived. But the silence was not the silence of victory. It was the silence of exhaustion. The silence of people who had been through something that had no language yet. Peter was the first to speak. It was waiting for them, said. The rock. It was waiting for them the same way it waited for us. But we gave it what it wanted. We returned the device. We gave it Havel. The coral's end came to take. And the rock does not give back what is taken. How do you know that? I do not know it. I am guessing. But I have spent 8 months studying this phenomenon. I have read every report, every analysis, every fragment of data my handlers could collect. And the pattern is consistent. The rock does not attack. It responds. It responds to intention. We came with curiosity. The coral's end came with violence. The rock responded accordingly. Then Havel is safe. Kitano's voice was firm. He is safe. He is where he wanted to be. I did not argue. I did not have the energy to argue. The ship hummed around us. The vents whispered. Somewhere behind us, in the darkness of the outer belt, a 4-kilometer rock was slowly digesting the people inside it. I thought about it as we flew. About the rock. About the network. About the 14 other sites that PETA had mentioned, scattered across the outer belt, each one containing a piece of the same structure we had found. If the protomolecule was waking them up, one by one, then the outer belt was full of sleeping volcanoes that were just beginning to stir. And we were the only ones who knew. Not that knowing changed anything. We could not warn anyone. We could not stop it. The war was consuming every channel of communication, every resource, every person who might have listened. The inner planets were too busy fighting each other to notice that something older was stirring in the darkness beyond their maps. We were 4 people on a broken ship, carrying a secret that would change everything if anyone believed it. No one would believe it. We did not speak much in the hours after the rock. Oki ran diagnostic after diagnostic, checking systems that did not need checking. She had not stopped moving since we left orbit. I think she was afraid of what would happen if she stopped. Kitano sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the stars, his hand resting on Havel's bag of stones. He had not put the bag down since we left the chamber. He held it the way a religious person holds a relic, with reverence, with grief, with hope. Peter retreated to the med bay, where Im had spent so many hours. I found him standing over the empty bunk where Havel had lain. Im was not doing anything, just standing, remembering. And I wrote. Kopis Edda, ship's log. The quarrel's end has been taken. By the rock. By the tunnels. By whatever consciousness lives inside KV 1191. Its crew entered the tunnels and did not come out. I watched it happen on the sensors. I did nothing. Maybe I could have warned them. Maybe I could have guided them out. Maybe I could have done something other than watch. But Havel chose the rock. He chose to stay, and the rock chose to keep him. It has chosen to keep the quarrels and its crew as well. I do not know if they are alive. I do not know if they are part of the network now, the same way Havel is. I do not know if Havel even knows they are there. But I know one thing. We are still here. The Kopis Edda is still flying. Oki is still breathing. Kitano is still praying. Peta is still carrying IMS guilt. Malode is still here. Havel is gone. The quarrel's end is gone. But Malode is still here. Sometimes that is all a Belter gets. I closed the log and sat in the dark of my cabin. The ship hummed around me. The vents whispered. Somewhere behind us, in the outer dark, a 4-kilometer rock was slowly digesting the people inside it and waiting, with infinite patience, for whatever came next. We were not going back. We were never going back. But I knew, with a certainty that sat cold in my chest, that the rock would not forget us. We had touched it. We had carried its device. We had given it one of our own. We were part of the network now, whether we wanted to be or not. I closed the log and went to the galley. Oki was there, staring at the schematic of the ship, at the 7 cracks that had formed the pattern of the tunnel. She had not put it away. They are still there, she said without looking up. The cracks. I checked. They have not healed. They have not spread, but they have not gone away. What does that mean? I do not know. Maybe the ship is part of the network now too. Maybe it will always carry the pattern. She traced the lines with her finger. Maybe we will too. I sat down across from her. The kettle was on. The steam rose. We will carry it, I said. That is what Belters do. We carry things. She looked at me. For the first time since we left the rock, she smiled. It was a small smile. Tired. Real. Ere we go, she said. Ere we go. We sat in the galley of the Kopis Edda, flying through the void between stars, carrying the memory of a rock that had swallowed our pampaw, and our certainty, and about 6 years off everyone's sleep. The ship hummed. The vents whispered. The network waited. And we flew. Chapter 14. What Beltalo to Keep. The weeks after the rock passed like time underwater. We did not go back to Tambalane Depot. We did not go anywhere that had a name. We burned for the inner system on a course that Kitano plotted through back channels and abandoned shipping lanes, staying off the main traffic routes, keeping our transponder dark except when we needed to refuel. The war was everywhere. News feeds were full of it. UN and MCR fleets maneuvering in the belt, OPA factions choosing sides, stations declaring neutrality and being ignored. The inner planets were tearing each other apart over the thing that had happened on Eros, the thing that had made a station move, the thing that had fallen into Venus. And none of them knew about the rock. None of them knew about the network. None of them knew that the outer belt was full of sleeping consciousness, waiting for a signal that had already been sent. We kept our silence. We had to. Who would we tell? The OPA channels that Peta's handlers had used were dark now, either compromised by the war or deliberately shut down. The inner planets would not believe us. The belt was too fractured to listen. The only people who might understand were inside the rock, and they were not answering. So we flew. We found work where we could, small contracts, off the books, paid in cash and supplies. We hauled water for a mining station that did not ask questions. We ran a courier package for a series trading house that paid in fuel. We did not talk about KV 1191. We did not talk about Havel. We did not talk about the quarrel's end. The silence between us was heavy at first. We moved around each other carefully, like people learning to share a space after a loss. Oki threw herself into repairs, fixing every minor issue on the ship, keeping her hands busy so her mind would not wander. Kitano spent hours in the pilot's seat, staring at the stars, talking to his stones. Peter kept to the med bay, organizing and reorganizing supplies, giving us space to process what we could not yet say. And I wrote. I wrote the log entries that became this record. I wrote because I needed to put the words somewhere, to give them a shape, to make them real. The news about Eros hit Venus came through on a Tuesday. I was in the galley, drinking cold tea that I had not tasted, when the alert flashed across the terminal. Eros station had impacted Venus. The protomolecule was on the second planet, doing whatever it was doing. The inner planets were in full panic. The belt was holding its breath. I stared at the screen for a long time. Eros had been a station, a place where people had lived and worked and died. And now it was gone, transformed into something that had hurled itself at a planet. The scale of it was too large to process. The horror of it was too abstract. But I understood one thing. We had been closer to the source than almost anyone. We had held a piece of it in our hands. We had watched it transform one of our own. And we had survived. That, I think, is what I will carry with me longest. Not the terror, not the loss, the survival. I found Kitano in the pilot's seat, staring at the news feed. His face was pale. "Eros," he said. "I know. The device in our rock, the one we returned, it is connected to this. The protomolecule on Eros, it sent a signal. And our rock, Pelka, she received it." "Are you sure?" She told me. Before we left the chamber, she showed me the connection. The network spans the belt. Every rock that was seeded, every node, they are all listening, waiting. And the signal from Eros, it was the first call. What happens when the next call comes? Kitano shook his head. "I do not know, but I do not think we want to be anywhere near the rocks when it does." We made port at Ceres 6 weeks after the rock. It was not planned. We needed supplies we could not get from the small stations, and Ceres was the closest major port that was not under blockade. The approach was tense. The docking request met with a long silence before a harried Port Authority clerk cleared us for berth 47C, a slip that had probably not been used in years. Ceres was crowded, the docks full of ships that had been diverted from other routes, the station's population swollen with refugees from smaller settlements that had been caught in the crossfire. The war had changed everything. The familiar chaos of Ceres had become something sharper, more desperate. There were arguments at every docking port, families sleeping in corridors, a tension in the air that I had never felt before. We moved through the crowds carefully, keeping our heads down. No one recognized us. No one asked where we had been. We were just 4 more belters, displaced by the war, looking for work and a place to sleep. But we found a berth. We resupplied. We did not stay long. While we were docked, I walked through the station alone. I needed to feel civilian life again, the press of bodies, the noise of commerce, the normal chaos of people who did not know about the rock and the network and the thing that was waking in the outer dark. I bought coffee from a vendor who did not ask where I had been. I sat on a bench and watched people hurry past. I tried to remember what it felt like to be one of them. I could not. The rock had changed me. The silence of the tunnels had gotten into my bones. I carried it with me like a second skeleton. While we were docked, Kitano asked if he could perform a ceremony. "For Havel," he said, "the Mons tradition, ascending." I did not know what ascending involved. I did not ask. I told him to do what he needed to do. He gathered us in the cargo bay. The lights were dim. He had set up a small arrangement of stones on the deck, his collection, the ones he had carried for years, plus the ones he had taken from the table in the chamber. He had arranged them in a pattern that matched the diagram he had drawn in his journal, the pattern of the network. "This is what Havel is part of now," Kitano said. "The network, the Song of the Rocks. In the Mons tradition, when a belter dies, we return a stone to the void, a piece of the rock they came from, sent back to the darkness between stars. But Havel is not dead. He is, translated. He is part of the network now. So we do not send a stone for him. We send a message." He held up a small piece of metal, a fragment from the Kopis Edda, a scrap of hull alloy that had been replaced during a repair. This is from the ship Havel loved, from the home he chose. We send it into the void, and we ask the network to carry it to him. He placed the fragment in a small container, sealed it, and handed it to me. Boss man, you should do the launch. I took the container. It was light in my hand, too light for what it carried. We cycled the airlock. I opened the outer door. The container drifted out into the darkness, caught by Ceres' rotation, spinning slowly as it fell away from the ship. Cetera, I said. Kitano began to sing. It was not a song in any language I knew, a low, wordless chant, the kind of sound that could have been hundreds of years old. Oki joined him after a few bars, her voice rough. Peta stood silent, head bowed. I watched the container until it was too small to see. After the ceremony, we gathered in the galley. It was the first time all four of us had sat at the same table since before the rock. The kettle was on. The ship hummed. The silence was not comfortable, but it was less heavy than it had been. Oki made tea. The same tea she had always made, from the same tin she had carried on every voyage I had known her for. The ritual of it was soothing. The boiling of the water, the steeping of the leaves, the careful pouring into mismatched cups. It was ordinary. It was human. It was exactly what we needed. He would have liked that, Oki said, being launched into the void. He always said he wanted to die in space. He did not die, Kitano said. I know, but it is the same thing for the ceremony. It is not the same thing. He is alive. He is part of something larger than we can understand. He is not gone. He is gone from us. Kitano did not argue that. He could not. Peta spoke. I have not been honest with you about the full scope of my mission. I looked at him. Go on. My handlers were part of a larger network. They were tracking not just KV 1191, but a series of similar anomalies across the outer belt. They had identified 14 potential sites before the war broke out. Since then, I do not know. The network has gone dark. The war has disrupted communications. But the sites are still there. The rocks are still there, waiting. 14 sites, Oki said. At least. There may be more. The protomolecule seeding of the solar system was not limited to Phoebe. It was everywhere. The outer belt was a primary target. The rocks were seeded with components, with nodes, with pieces of a network that was designed to activate under specific conditions. And we woke it. Eros woke it. We just happened to be at one of the nodes when the signal arrived. The information settled into the room like dust. 14 rocks, 14 networks, 14 chambers, each one containing a piece of something that was still waking up. What do we do? Oki asked. Nothing, I said. Nothing. There is nothing we can do. We cannot warn anyone. We cannot stop it. We cannot even confirm that the other sites exist. We are 4 people on a water hauler with a patched hull and no backup. The universe is larger than we are, and it is doing what it does. We cannot change it. That is a terrible answer. It is the only answer. Oki slammed her hand on the table. The cups jumped. The tea sloshed. I hate this, she said. I hate that we saw something real and we cannot tell anyone. I hate that Havel gave himself for nothing. He did not give himself for nothing, Kitano said quietly. He gave himself because he believed it mattered, that the seal would hold, that the rock would be left alone. Left alone to do what? Grow? Spread? Wake up the other rocks? I do not know, but that is what he chose. Oki stared at him. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were clenched. I know, she said finally. I know he chose. That does not mean I have to like it. No one is asking you to like it. We sat in the silence. The universe continued its catastrophe at a distance. Eros hit Venus. The inner planets held their breath. The belt waited to see what it was owed. Nobody asked the crew of the Kopis Edda what they had seen in the outer dark. That was the strangest part in the weeks that followed. The silence. We had witnessed something that should have changed everything. We had held a piece of the proto-molecules network in our hands. We had watched it transform one of our own. And no one asked. No one knew. The war consumed all the attention, all the bandwidth, all the concern that might have gone to a small survey rock in the outer belt that nobody had ever bothered to name. We were ghosts. We had seen the truth of the universe, and we had returned to a world that did not want to hear it. That night, I wrote the final entry in this log. Kopis Edda, ship's log, Yeva Dreschler-Bo writing. I am writing this because it should be written somewhere. Because Havel Marksuksane deserves to be named somewhere. Because the rocks are alive and the void between bones is full of something that does not need us to survive, but did not stop us from surviving either. That, to a belter, is about as much grace as you can ask for. We never went back to Tambalane Depot. We never filed the survey. The contract money, the unusually good contract money, we spent on fuel and silence. There is no one safe to tell. The inner planets are at war. The belt is fracturing. And somewhere in the outer dark, a 4-kilometer rock is slowly digesting the people inside it and waiting, with infinite patience, for whatever comes next. Oki is sitting across from me as I write this. She is reading a repair manual for a drive system that we do not have. Her hand is resting on the bulkhead, palm flat, feeling the ship's song. She has been doing that more since the rock. She says she can hear the music now. Kitano is in the pilot's seat. He has hung Havel's bag of named stones from the console, where Havel used to sit during burns. He talks to them sometimes. I do not find it strange anymore. Peta is in the med bay, running inventory. Im does not ask for forgiveness, because Im understands it has to be given freely. Slowly, it is beginning to be given. As for me, I am still here, still flying, still carrying the weight of every crew member I have ever lost. Havel is the fourth. I hope he is the last. But I do not know. That is the thing about the belt. You never know. The next rock could be the one that kills you. The next contract could be the one that saves you. The next silence could be the one that carries a signal you cannot hear. I look at Oki across the table. She has fallen asleep with the repair manual open on her chest. Her hand is still touching the bulkhead. Even in sleep, she is listening. I look at Kitano through the open hatch of the bridge. He is in the pilot's seat, talking softly to the stones, telling them about the rock we left behind. They do not answer, but he does not need them to. I look at Peta. Im is in the med bay, organizing supplies for the 100th time. Im catches my eye through the open door and nods. A small nod. A beginning. They are my crew. They are my family. They are all I have left. And that is enough. Wallet is still here. Melota carry the Pampa with us now. Cetera, like the stars, carry everything that burned in them a long time ago. Bistgut, Baratna. Bistgut. The void between bones is not empty. Here we go. End of chapter 14. End of the void between bones.